A group of adventurers stood before the entrance to an ancient and dangerous dungeon, a place known for luring greedy treasure seekers with promises of easy gain and hiding deadly traps. Among them are those that are deadly dangerous. No one should even dare to explore them. Despite this, the group remains determined, and the apprentice calmly asks the master what to do next. In a dark room surrounded by threatening creatures, a young man with a cold gaze and a barely noticeable smile gives the order to drive out the uninvited. His presence commands respect, and the monsters around tense up, preparing to obey, clearly indicating that strangers are not welcome here. This is the story of an alchemist who was expelled, but he did not disappear. He rose and became the most powerful ruler of dungeons in the world. The royal capital Alraj spread out in rows of orderly houses and lively streets, and among the rooftops, city life beats to its own rhythm. The rhythm played, and rumors spread. Something is being whispered about in the local tavern. In the noisy tavern, people joyfully raise their glasses and loudly celebrate the hero Alan and his team, who defeated the terrible Ouroboros dungeon. Amid ovations and raised glasses, he is called the perfect hero and a living legend. Despite the fame and amazing feats, a quiet remark was made: even they are not perfect. In a laboratory full of bottles and books, the alchemist works enthusiastically. Something bubbles in the cauldron, and he laughs to himself, confident in his mixture. Suddenly, the potion unexpectedly reacted and released steam. He, surprised, carefully looked at what he had just created. The young alchemist Rick Allord celebrates. With delight, his new potion succeeded. His job is to create alchemical items that support adventurers during dangerous missions, despite his carefree appearance. The success of groups facing dungeon trials depends on him. The hero Alan, known throughout the country for his strength and feats, steps into Rick's laboratory. He is respected as a master swordsman and conqueror of many dungeons. Rick excitedly shows a new elixir he just prepared, but Alan, as straightforward as always, says he needs to talk about something important. Without unnecessary words, Alan coldly announces that Rick is being expelled from the group. The news suddenly caught the alchemist at the very moment he was handing over the freshly made potion. Confused, Rick barely manages to react to the sudden decision. In shock, he asks if it was a joke. Alan replies coldly, making it clear there is no joke here. He says the decision to expel him was made by all group members, and Rick, in despair and disbelief, shouts that it is a lie, not understanding how everyone could turn away from him. Still trying to figure out what is happening, Rick asks why he was expelled. Alan coldly cuts in that he found a better alchemist. Then he introduces Dorma Griggan. She radiates confidence and indifference, clearly making it understood that she was not connected to Rick and that the replacement was final. Alan coldly stated that from now on Dorma would occupy Rick's room. Even when the alchemist looked surprised, he stubbornly said that after expulsion, it was natural to leave, saying the room was only borrowed. Confused and hurt, Rick recalls the long years lived with Alan and Victor, trying to understand why everything changed so suddenly. Finally, Alan exploded with criticism, calling Rick dead weight for the group, a fool obsessed with research who only got in the way. Not hiding his contempt, he throws out that Rick was never fit for the team. To these harsh words, Rick responds only silently, holding back the pain of rejection. Although he was expelled, Rick offers Dorma an improved potion, trying to prove that he is still worth something. At first surprised, she admits that she expected some skill from him, since he was in the group of heroes. But she quickly changes tone, brazenly stating that she can brew the same potion, that he is not her equal at all, and disdainfully rejects his offer. Rick runs away irritated and humiliated, and Alan contemptuously ignores his departure and says he doesn't care about incompetence, ordering Dorma to prepare for the next dungeon, as if Rick's expulsion was a trifle. Dorma pretends to understand, but coldly notes how pathetic the one who was once in their group looks. Alan, indifferent, adds that Rick was never worthy to stand next to a hero. Finally, he entrusts his hopes to Dorma, and she with a confident smile promises not to disappoint him. Alone in the forest, Rick sinks to the ground, broken, still trying to come to terms with the fact that he was really expelled. Tears roll. He recalls how many times he saved Alan with his potions. Wounded but determined, he decides to go further. He will sell them and try to earn at least some money, though the burden of betrayal still hurts. Rick was walking through the forest and came across an elf lying among the flowers, wounded and unconscious. Surprised by what he saw, he involuntarily approached, shocked by the condition of the mysterious woman. Rick rushed to help the fallen woman, who barely asks for help. Seeing her wings, he immediately realized she is not human. The young woman calls herself Yuri. Yuri, the dungeon spirit, stunned by this discovery. Rick understood that he had encountered something much greater than he imagined, and with surprise realized that dungeon spirits actually exist and have human form. Yuri, barely holding on and coughing, admits that she is dying from lack of energy and explains that to survive, she must make a contract with a desperate human. In the middle of the forest, she extends her hand and begs Rick to make this bond with her. Rick shudders when a werewolf appears before him, a creature that should not be here. It growls fiercely and attacks. Without even having time to think, Rick tries to dodge, but a fierce blow throws him far away. Wounded and forced to fight the werewolf alone after 2 weeks, Rick hesitates as the creature approaches. Seeing Yuri on the brink of death, he makes a decision. Not fully understanding what it means, he extends his hand and agrees to sign a contract with her, ready to risk everything to save her. As soon as Rick accepts the contract, a bright light envelops them both, and Yuri smiles with relief, announcing that the bond is complete. Immediately, something begins to change. The werewolf before them grows and instantly transforms, while Rick stands and watches, stunned by the creature's reaction after the pact. As soon as the contract is signed, a black sphere of energy swallows Rick. He screams in amazement as his body is pulled inside. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself floating in a mysterious space. Not understanding what is happening, he suddenly falls. Confused and frightened by the unexpected transition, Rick wakes up in an unfamiliar, magnificent structure. Looking around in surprise, he sees Yuri appear and joyfully announces that the dungeon is complete, and he realizes, thanks to the contract, a new dungeon has been created. And now he is its master. Rick asks if Yuri is all right, and she happily thanks him for the contract, jokingly calling him both master and beloved. But this moment is interrupted by the return of the werewolf. He is still alive and insanely furious. Yuriax quickly throws something to Rick, warning that the enemy is still dangerous. Rick receives a mysterious book and suddenly understands. It is a catalog of dungeons. You enthusiastically encourage him to create a monster, and she explains that as the new dungeon master, he has full control over this place and can shape creatures and rules as he pleases. Rick decides to use the catalog and summons 5 monster eggs, spending his dungeon points. One by one, shells crack before him and Uri's eggs begin to hatch. Meanwhile, the werewolf approaches with a threatening roar, but Rick's creatures are about to be born. The eggs break with a crash, and to Rick Watch's surprise, goblins emerge from the shards, immediately attacking the werewolf. He tries to react, but is surrounded and beaten relentlessly. Rick Watch is stunned, and Yuri smiles with satisfaction. The new ally proved effective. When the goblins defeated the werewolf, Yuri confessed that she had been searching for a master for 9 years. The dungeon spirits die if they do not make a contract within 10 years, and she was already on the edge. Moved, she admits that she feels like a failure, but sincerely thanks Rick for accepting her. Rick, touched by her sincerity, silently looks at her, surprised by her vulnerability. Rick promises to put all his effort into creating an incredible dungeon, although he does not yet know exactly what he is capable of. Moved, Yuri felt a kinship and declared that she would always be by his side, listening to every word. She hugged him emotionally tightly, and even the goblins showed loyalty, promising to protect him. Surprised and moved by their unity, Rick smiles confidently, and Yuri explains that by becoming the dungeon master. Later, Rick will have to defend his dungeon from adventurers and monster invasions. She encourages him to prepare for attacks and promises to guide him at that moment. Rick finally sees the harsh reality. Now he is officially an enemy of humanity, and he cannot avoid meeting Alan and the former comrades who have forsaken him. Lying down with a sincere look, Yuri says she is ready to do anything for Rick, if only it is his command. She begs to be left by his side forever. Rick, embarrassed by her words in this situation, swallows hard and does not know how to react immediately. Yuri looks on, breathing heavily and confused. Rick calmly began listing the necessary equipment: a copper distiller, a scalpel, and a boiling cauldron, and the goblins instantly helped gather the materials. But Yuri, frightened by the number of tools and substances, could not stand it interrupted, and asked what he was going to do with all of this. That Rick thinks about the mess he got into. He remembered that the contract with Yuri was made completely by accident. Looking at her, he sees, apart from wings and ears, she is an ordinary girl, and no matter how much he does not want to think so, he must admit to himself that Yuri is truly sweet. Yuri looks at Rick anxiously and asks what is wrong, and he struggles with his thoughts, convincing himself that he helped her only because it was the right thing to do, and he cannot allow himself to succumb to her charms. Embarrassed, he looks away and hurriedly says it is nothing, but deep in his heart he knows, now that they are connected, they will stay together forever. Yuri explains the dungeon's energy is measured in dungeon points DP, which Rick can spend to create monsters, traps, and various items from the catalog. Enthralled, he discovers that he can craft both ordinary things and adventure equipment. Enthralled, he even imagines his own workshop, but Yuri quickly stops him. You can't do that, and yet Rick barely contains his excitement from so many possibilities. Yuri says that the dungeon drains life energy mostly from wild monsters and adventurers and converts it into dungeon points. Treasures are just bait, and attacks are constant, like that werewolf that appeared earlier. She insists that Rick first focus on defense, creating monsters and traps to repel invaders, and only then spend points on his desires. Rick realizes, although the environment is ideal for an alchemist, the most important thing for him now is to protect everything as the dungeon master. Yuri tells him that right now Rick only has those monsters he created earlier. Goblins and slimes all rank G, the weakest possible. Rick asks if monsters are generated completely randomly, and Yuri says it depends on luck. The chance of catching 5 rank G monsters in a row is tiny, but it happened, and disappointed Rick understands that relying only on luck to protect his dungeon is unreliable. Rick considers whether to spend the remaining points on expanding the dungeon, but hesitates. It's too risky. Yuri suggests he go into battle himself, but he refuses, thinking. Finding this idea absurd, he sees himself as an alchemist, not a warrior, but the imagined waves of enemies approaching press on him. When he asks if he looks strong, Yuri gently replies that even if he is weak, her feelings for him will never change. Suddenly, Rick remembered something. An idea instantly flashed in his mind. He confidently told Yuri that monsters created with dungeon points fully obey their master. Finally, hearing her confirmation, he smiles decisively and asks her to prepare a few things for him. Then the scene shifts to the royal capital of the entire Raja. It is clear that his plan is about to go beyond the dungeon. In the royal capital, Alan Cole the hero sits at a banquet with a company and is clearly irritated, in a bad mood. One of the companions tries to cheer him up, but Alan openly shows his dissatisfaction, and although there is a rich table and noise around, something clearly bothers him, so the atmosphere at the table remains tense. Alan begins to interrogate his teammates about mistakes on the last mission, and first scolds Mathilda for using the wrong magic against an enemy vulnerable to fire. Alan pressures Fitz for defeating the wrong enemy, and Fitz tries to justify himself, but despite Tank Victor's attempts to ease the atmosphere, Alan remains demanding. The scene shows that even heroes have conflicts and tension in the team, especially due to Alan's perfectionism, which explodes during the meeting with the team. He is clearly dissatisfied with Dorma's play, criticizing literally everything from the timing of support to the very strategic decisions. Cornered, Dorma cannot respond. She is trembling and begins to apologize. Disappointed, Alan doubts whether the perfection he saw in his group was just an illusion, and this shows that even his new alliance does not meet expectations. Victor intervenes in the dispute, scolds Alan for his behavior, and asks him to stop the attacks. He tries to smooth the situation, reminding that Dorma is new to the group and joined precisely because she admired the heroes. Alan, irritated, silently watches for a moment. Then, with a dark and indifferent look, he orders Dorma to leave, coldly and authoritatively ending the matter. When the team tries to move on after the conversation, the members openly admit, since Rick left, they have been careless. Victor confesses that they made serious mistakes, and everyone tries to calm the tension. Dorma is clearly trembling. Mary the healer tries to encourage her so she does not lose heart, but the atmosphere remains tense. Alan is clearly irritated. He bangs on the table in anger, unable to hide his outrage. Alan bursts into rage when recalling those events. He justifies his plan. It was not reckless. The trial was only of rank G for a hero, and he believes he should be fighting dungeons of rank SSS, not allowing himself to be limited, succumbing to disappointment and the feeling that he is being sabotaged. He kicks some furniture and shouts loudly why he was stopped. His gaze burns with a mixture of rage and the desire to prove he is worth something, and on Alan's face is a creepy smile. He thinks he could have handled this trial alone if only he had it. He tries to justify his failure, saying it was just bad luck, but soon it turns out he did not activate something vital. Remembering this tool or resource, his attention falls on the flasks and alchemical instruments, and he whispers with surprise and admiration, "Monster synthesis." Rick explains that monster synthesis is a kind of alchemy. Although he is not an expert in this field, he just read a little about it. Yuri, stunned by his memory, asks, "Do you really remember everything?" And Rick confidently says that for alchemists it is natural, and that with the right ingredients the synthesis attempt costs 300 DP the goal. To evolve a monster from rank G directly to rank D, skipping 2 classes at once. Enthralled, Rick decides to immediately test this idea, hoping it will work. Rick starts the monster synthesis process. First, he mixes chemical reagents. Then he pulls a magic stone from the goblin's body. Finally, he throws the body into the cauldron and stirs the contents fiercely. Despite the rough method, he decides that it is enough just to add the magic stone to complete everything. Yuri looks scared, and Rick, dirty and exhausted, admits that alchemy is much tougher than he expected. Meanwhile, Victor is stunned by the number and endurance of the monsters. Although they are ordinary, they appeared continuously. Alan suddenly feels something wrong and shouts to Victor, "Dodge," but it was already too late. Victor is frightened suddenly, a fierce attack hits him, showing how close the danger has come to the group. The villainess looks at the group with a defiant smile. Victor lies fallen, and Alan covers him. She mockingly sneers, calls Alan a rude person, and says she wants to see what kind of parents could have raised someone like him. Alan responds with contempt, immune to her provocations. So Alan and Victor become alert when they sense the threatening presence of the woman before them. Although she looks harmless, Alan feels that she is much more dangerous than any monster they have faced so far. Victor warns not to be fooled by appearances, and Alan confirms he has felt that dark aura since the moment they entered the second floor and finally found its source. Victor watches as the irritated and mysterious woman points at the group and says how annoying they are. Suddenly, smiling, she swiftly steps toward him, and he, surprised, does not manage to dodge a powerful blow strikes him with full force. Monsters advance, Victor is severely wounded and spits blood. The group is in shock, and Damash shouts fiercely. She takes command, orders the monsters to destroy those in the rear, holds the front line herself, and decisively leaves cowardly Damab behind. Victor stood firm and unleashed a powerful magical attack that swept away the monsters before him and caused a terrible explosion that turned the battlefield into ruins, while the woman looked coldly, assessing the situation. The explosion destroyed the field, but the woman simply smiled. She was impressed by Victor's speed. She notes that this is the first time someone has managed to scratch her skin, and Victor, out of breath and irritated, prepares to continue the fight alongside comrades who are shouting, reinforcing the rear. Victor rushed forward with a fierce cry, shouting that he himself would overthrow the enemy. Raising his sword, he charged into the attack and aimed directly at the woman, while Alan watched the determined movement of his comrades. Victor charged forward with all his might, rushing straight at the mysterious woman and shouted decisively. As he approaches, the ground roils with explosions of small shells that begin to surround and target him specifically, but he steps forward without hesitation, focused only on his goal. Victor tries to attack, but the woman powerfully strikes him in the face with her foot, smiling with amusement and saying that he entertains her more than she expected. The blow hits him right in the face. Throwing his head back, he screams in pain. Cruz watches and realizes that the woman is just playing with Alan. He notices with surprise that, although he thought she could barely match him, she clearly controls the fight and effortlessly dominates him. Finally, Alan understood how truly dangerous this woman was and was forced to admit to himself that the gap in levels was much greater than he had thought. Meanwhile, with a cold sneer, she mockingly says that these are just child's play, ridicules his strength, and asks if that is all he can show. Alan, in despair, tries to activate his ability while the woman delivers a brutal blow to him, clearly already bored, and says, "Just die already." He pushes with his mind for his ability to work, but nothing happens, which surprises her. She was also expecting a reaction that does not come. Outside, Cruz observes and finds it strange because Alan should already be under enough pressure for his power to activate. However, Alan is stunned. He suddenly realizes that maybe this is the end and asks himself if that was really all, while the teams also stand in surprise, not understanding how the fight ended so easily and thinking that everything is already over. The woman moves to finish off Alan. He falls to the ground, clearly hit. Suddenly, Tony rushed to defend Alan, stopped the enemy's attack, and declared that the rear is already under his control, while Alan, surprised and irritated, asked where the rear support had gone. Tony confidently replied, and at that very moment, a dark, formidable figure appeared on the field, further intensifying the conflict. Alan looks seriously as the huge runic golem Domo emerges from the ground, awakened by magical signs carved into the soil, and Domo appears out of breath but smiling, apologizing for being late and explaining that he prepared everything after noticing the difference in power between them and the enemy. Alan simply growls "Ach," irritated by the situation, but knows what advantage the golem can provide. The woman froze in shock as a huge runic golem rose before her. Surprise and confusion were evident on her face. She tries to comprehend what kind of colossal creature suddenly appeared and completely changed the course of the battle. The floor of the second floor glows with magical energy accumulated by monsters, and the runes carved directly on the golem make it even stronger. Meanwhile, the group watches, stunned. The woman in glasses confidently smiles and admits that the alchemist responsible for this is much more skilled than she thought, while the opponent disdainfully analyzes the situation and concludes that the golem is a simple puppet being controlled. World Cruz boldly steps forward to show his true power, shouting that size does not matter before strength, but an ally tries to warn him not to attack, and the golem reacts at that very moment. This prepares a powerful counterattack that will stun everyone. And suddenly, a huge monster grew next to the girl. The giant protects her and prepares to fight the approaching golem, She looks calm, confident, while he becomes her shield, and the confrontation intensifies. The monster next to the girl suddenly began to behave strangely, making strange sounds and flickering flashes, and this stunned everyone. The dark-haired boy realized that this was not just a bluff, and he was gripped by genuine anxiety. The girl looks at the monster puzzled, not understanding what is happening at all. The boy froze in shock. The golem turned out to be just a distraction, and the real target was the weakening runes carved on it. By destroying the golem, they activated a trap that imposes a powerful weakening on whoever defeated it. Seeing the danger, he shouted to the crews to retreat immediately, and she reacted with surprise and irritation. The group decided to retreat to avoid even greater damage and resolve everything in the fortress, because they fear that the teams will suffer from the debuff if they rush forward recklessly. Meanwhile, the woman with the monster admits that he could not enter the fortress because of his size. Yes, before leaving, she warns that next time it will be the end for them, and the hero stands with a tense look. Look, the woman throws the last warning, telling them to pray and expect the worst. At first, the group froze and silently watched as she and the monsters retreated. They noticed with relief that they were retreating, and Victor, still stunned, said with disbelief that somehow they managed to survive that situation. Alan grabbed the sorceress by the collar and barked at her not to get cocky since they entered the dungeon. She's been doing everything her own way and ignoring his orders. The sorceress tries to justify herself, but he shouts that she only needs to follow his damn orders, while another companion watches and says that it is precisely because of this that she remained alive, although Alan claims that she still had strength thanks to the golden elixir. Alan retreats and says that from the very beginning, he did not count on Damas's help. Victor still praises Damas for his work, tries to encourage him, and asks him not to pay attention. Alan is just irritated because he suffered a defeat for the first time in a long while. Meanwhile, Victor reproaches Damas acting without orders is still a problem, even if he understands the reason. Soon Damas hesitantly calls Victor, and says that when he was molding the golem, near the monster corpses, he came across something strange. Victor raises a small vial in front of the victims and asks if they recognize this item, thus showing what Damas found. Cruz, wounded and disappointed that she did not defeat a single enemy, receives comfort from comrades who say that the main goal has been achieved, and pursuing further is too risky. So looking at this page, Cruz and her group understood they have enough golden elixirs to deal with the heroes before they reach the third floor. They say they know Alan and Victor well, and emphasize, the enemy mage is versatile, able to both attack and defend, and the healer releases a healing smoke that simultaneously heals and clouds vision, which greatly complicates matters for them. This page talks about Damas saying he is much more unpredictable than expected, and each time appears with hidden tricks. Yes, Cruz notices, the title better alchemist than they are is not just words, but she still feels that something is wrong with him. Him as if there is something more in him that she cannot fully comprehend. Meanwhile, Yuri begins to blush and humiliate herself, saying that against the genius of the master her level is nothing, and on this page the group starts putting together a puzzle about Damas. They understand that he uses inventions beyond ordinary alchemy, and that probably these things were not ordered by Alan, meaning his appearance has another purpose. They remember Alan chose Damas not only for his alchemical skills, but also because he follows orders to the letter, and also since they entered the dungeon, only Alan has drunk the golden elixir, so this might be the weak link of that group, and moreover they suspect that on the monster's side there is a person with advanced alchemical knowledge. On this page the group secretly discusses something. Victor asks not to tell Alan anything yet and promises to talk to the right person at the right time, and they are surprised only a few alchemists can create the golden elixir. Such a thing is so rare that even they know about it. Then Victor, thoughtful and suspicious, looks intently at Rick and mentally asks, "Is it you?" hinting that he considers Rick involved in the fact that the person ended up with the monsters, or even in something much bigger. At this moment the group counts losses and examines the consequences of the clash. They say that by that time they had lost a comrade, and the hero also came out quite wounded. For them it was devastating to see a fallen enemy. They say it was probably a direct ancestor, a rare sight, and then they look with anxiety and even reproach, wondering why someone risks everything to save another during a battle. The group argued about honor and the true meaning of a hero. One of them coldly said that if the hero had fallen there, it would have stained his title, because a true hero would never humiliate himself to finish off a wounded enemy like a vulture, and he declared that one can become a true hero only by defeating him with their own hands, and another, realizing that arguing was pointless, simply resigned himself. Meanwhile, Damas assures that he installed an automatic system in the golem that will intercept any anomaly, and asks his comrade to think only about recovery. He replies with a simple, "Aha." Victor and Damas found out that only a few alchemists can make golden potions, and looked at Rick with suspicion. It turns out Rick is self-taught. he never belonged to the alchemist's community, but once was in the hero's squad. Group, later Demad despises him, coldly saying that he is not worthy to be in Alan's group. Rick takes the potion brought by Demad, which explains that this is a special version of the golden elixir. It is created to enhance the existing abilities of the one who consumes it, but Rick is confused and suspicious. He does not fully understand what DOMA means, and the alchemist says that the effect is unique to each person and depends on individual potential. Demad looks at the potion, irritated that Rick tampered with the formula of the legendary golden elixir without being a certified alchemist. Still, she admits that Rick has skills he was once in a hero squad, but when she looks more closely, she notices something strange in that potion and wonders, not understanding exactly what she is looking at, while Rick watches with a barely noticeable smile as Demad analyzes him in shock. She realized this is completely different, as if made by an amateur who just copied what he saw and did not understand why. Rick, however, admits that he recreated the golden elixir from scratch, using completely different ingredients. Something a genius worked on for years and perfected, clearly showing the scale of the achievement. Demad, not believing her eyes, looks at the laboratory and tries to convince herself that she could also make something similar after all. Rick is just an amateur to her. This unsettles her, but the truth gnaws at her. Someone who treats alchemy only as a hobby should not surpass alchemists who have devoted their entire lives to it, and this thought deeply shakes her. In the crowded hall, Rick sinks into memories. Everyone was impressed when Fitz met him with mockery and explained the basic rules of the group. Never anger Alan under any circumstances. The scene shows how strong the hero's influence is on everyone present, even the strongest and most confident. Matilda boldly introduces herself as a sorceress. Mary is a healer who warmly welcomes the new member, while Fitz meanwhile explains that the group often changes people and is never larger than 8. The tension in the team is palpable, and Rick feels he replaced someone who was immediately gotten rid of as soon as he appeared. The group reveals that everyone here came for their own benefit. For example, fame, wealth, or debts for the hero, these are just expendable things that he exchanges without hesitation. Among them, there is provocation and distrust, although everyone admits they were chosen for their skills. She considers this company just a bunch of lazy and unambitious people, but honestly tells herself, no matter how bad it is, this is still the hero's team, so she will use everything she can, even if she has to swallow her own pride. After 2 months, the alchemist asks for more money to establish a stable production line of potions. Supposedly, this will help during expeditions. The irritated hero pressures her about her role in the group, questioning whether she even does the work that is needed. The hero sharply criticizes the alchemist, saying that she even does poorly the little she already knows and ultimately becomes just a burden. He sharply orders her to return to the room and focus on what she has to do. Although she has good resources and a favorable environment for research, the alchemist admits that her actions are still very limited. But after another failure in experiments, the alchemist is disappointed and wonders how much longer she can endure chasing empty achievements. She doubts whether it is worth continuing to work in the heroes group and participate in dungeon expeditions. Will this really bring any benefit to her future? A man approaches Demad and surprises her by saying he knows her name, and not just because she is from the heroes team. But through her dissertation, she published a work on the hybrid development of alchemy and magic, a text that the conservative academic elite despised and never gave a chance for recognition. This clearly shakes and deeply moves DOMA. The man praises Demad's research and says that for them her work is truly fascinating. He suggests, together with them, she could have support to continue her studies. Demad listens, but soon directly asks what they want in return. Distrust is heard in her voice, although she is interested, and this is where the chapter ends. An hour has already passed since the dungeon research began. On the first floor, the killer simply allowed himself to be killed. In the forest on the first level, a fierce battle broke out between Alan's squad and the horde led by Cruz. They managed to repel the attack thanks to the rune golem created by the alchemist Demad. Demad and the group were moving forward. The golem was ahead. It helped with security and surveillance. Although it consumed fuel inefficiently, the floor soil was saturated with mana, and creating it was easier. Demad believed that his invention would change the world of adventurers, but Alan warned not to be distracted by thoughts of profit, although the dungeon patent could bring big money. Suddenly they remembered that they were still in the dungeon, and that the assassin was the first to die due to carelessness. Someone noted that the group members looked so innocent and very lucky. The researcher thinks that to return to science, she will need a lot of money for research and to achieve concrete results. The automatic map and rune golem became a reality thanks to the support of Tony and his group. If during the reconnaissance he proves that these tools are really useful, everyone will benefit. The man plans to bestow upon Alan the title of hero. Their goal is to kill Alan. the woman, who wants to return to the academy, says that this way she will become a true heroine and asks her comrades for help. Even if she had not agreed, the plan would have been carried out anyway. Later, they will capture the dungeon, where Alan fell in the middle and bestowed upon himself the title of hero. There is no other way. She will have to act alone. The initial plan regarding the fortress was simple: to break inside. A group of enemies was surprised to see the golem advancing right in front of them. They did not expect this because of its huge size. They realize this is practically a siege of the fortress, and it forces them to engage in direct combat. Skeleton archers from the walls rain arrows. The golem is currently covering the group, but is gradually breaking down. They cannot attack from afar, and the weakening rune only works on direct contact. Alan orders them to force the golem to break the fortress gates, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, an elf, smiling, looks at the situation and says, "This is a trifle." She admits that she herself was unexpectedly captivated by the events. The elf says that Alan seems to get excited when things get complicated, and this surprises her because he himself did not notice it, and he admits with a smile that it somehow makes him happy. She concludes that alchemy is precisely the transformation of unexpected results into new discoveries, and that is why she feels the same way. Alan looks with a challenge in his smile, hoping that the golem will exceed his expectations. Soon the golem crashes down the fortress gates with a roar, breaking through the path. Alan gives the order to attack, and the group rushes right behind the golem, which keeps breaking the defense. But suddenly something huge and dark begins to move, drawing their attention and causing surprise. Suddenly a wyvern appeared and charged at the group in the open field. Everyone was vulnerable and in a losing position, so Alan ordered the others to move to the fortress, while he stays behind holding the creature and covering them. The wyvern attacks fiercely, catching Victor by surprise and destroying part of the defense. Alan and the explorer are shocked by what they see and shout Victor's name in the chaos. Alan is stunned to see Victor wounded, but quickly pulls himself together and acts. He sternly cut everyone off, stopped complaining, and moved quickly. The explorer hesitated, but insisted he would change his mind only if they wanted to die here from weakness. Dema agrees Alan is right. The escape route is blocked, and the fortress is teeming with monsters, so going forward is the smartest choice. Through the darkness, the explorer extends a potion of night vision, but Alan refuses, saying he does not need it. Opponents insist that no one remains on Alan's side, and now they will decide everything. Alan and his allies understand the enemies are fully prepared for battle, even after he lost his partner, and then Alan gives the order to attack, unwavering in his determination. The group is worried about Victor, in fear that time is running out if they lose this floor. Only the third level remains, where a fire dragon lurks. The master reassured Yuri. The restoration of the dungeon was part of the plan for such cases, and it showed that he was prepared for such a failure. They counted there are 5 strong adventurers left in the enemy group, and even with the fire dragon, they can only hold them back for 5 minutes. The master thinks that even sending squads, they still will not understand what Dema has planned, and fears making a mistake by underestimating him as just an alchemist. Everything he has built so far can collapse, and he is torn in two, not knowing which decision to make. The hero is struck with full force. He remembers his connections with Yuri and others, and all that alchemical dungeon they built together. In his head he screams, calls his father a fool, and feels sharp pain from the fact that everything he has achieved is about to fall apart. Kruz approached the master and shouted sharply, "You only had to give the order to attack together." She reminds him that they were all there when the enemy invaded, and that he said they would give everything. Now she asks herself, did that mean to face danger together, when everyone has the same determination, and not just his idea of what it means to give everything? The elf says that Yuri was almost dead before he saved her, and as Kruz said, it's true, she does not regret giving her life. He saved him and asked not to hesitate, and to make a quick decision. The main hero heard this shocked and thoughtful. The elf woman extends her hand and reminds the hero that he is the master of this dungeon. He looks at her and at his comrades thoughtfully. In his thoughts he tells himself, yes, this is right, he is responsible for everything there. He thinks that unpredictable situations should not be feared. Alchemy has always been like that, many trials and errors until you find the truth. He understands that nothing has changed. He decides to seize the moment, and with a confident smile, thanks Yuri and Kruz for being there. He understands that this is a decisive moment and a great risk, but he meets it with a determined smile. Looking at his allies, he decides to move forward and confidently shouts, "Let's start the experiment." Alan's group moves through a corridor strewn with monster corpses. Dema reviews the map and warns. Ahead, it seems, is the main hall. Be careful not to be surrounded. Alan just walks silently, completely focused. Alan steps into a wide courtyard. Enemies are waiting for him there. He smiles confidently and says that it seems the final confrontation will be decided here. Determination is read on the faces of the opponents, so the outcome of this battle will be decided soon. Under the eclipse, Alan looks serious. The enemy approached, laughing defiantly, and mockingly asked what happened to that small army of Alan in the forest, adding, "Don't rejoice yet, the battle is just beginning." Alan watches as the sorceress summons a tall orc and the chief troll, saying she cannot waste strength and resources on them. She prepares them; these monsters become the vanguard, emerging from the shadows to rush at Alan's group. In the group, the enemy woman says she must save strength for other invaders. Teasing Alan, he explodes with rage and snarls, "Do you really think there will be a next time?" She replied that he should take better care of himself, sneered mockingly, hoping that kid there would save him again, and this made Alan grind his teeth in fury. Alan rushes forward in anger, shouting that no one should engage with him, and delivers a powerful blow to the enemy. While his allies watch tensely and call to him, they are stunned by the sudden outburst of rage and display of power. I recalled how in the forest it was visible how huge the gap in strength was between Alan and Cruz, but even so Alan's strength could not be ignored if we confronted him head-on. He could disrupt the movements of our group. So he decisively forces two monsters at the front to hold Alan, while he restrains him himself. While the monsters hold Alan at the front, Cruz advances to strike from the rear, and this is considered the right move. Dama calls iron; he instantly grasps everything and throws a brief, "Understood," ready to act according to the plan. Crius reacted indignantly upon seeing the smoke screen rise. "That won't work on me," and soon Dama calmly activated his magic and said, "Explosion." And suddenly a blinding flash exploded there, stunning the teams in the middle of the attack. The magical explosion tears out a huge crater and raises a cloud of debris. Meanwhile, Aaron notices Cruz's movement from the 1 o'clock direction, precisely fixes his position, and tensely prepares to intercept. Alan repels the troll's attack, while Aaron takes a hit and thinks that first they need to deal with the small one Cruz. At the same time, the Cruz prepare for a new strike. Their faces show iron concentration and icy calm. Cruz is amazed. Alan keeps her pace, and that's without any backup. Meanwhile, they say that Aren is a true ace of smoke magic. He disperses flammable dust and senses movements by the tiniest particles in the air, while Tony guesses the enemy's next move by the slightest change in the smoke. In the dungeon, this gives them a huge advantage, unlike in the forest. Tony casts the spell Magic Missile, and Alan shouts his body seems to dissolve into the fog, driving the enemies crazy. Tony looks closely and realizes Alan took advantage of the moment when the smoke from the explosion dispersed, turned into mist, and slipped away, surprising them. Alan watches and thinks, this is true coordination, a group of S-rank adventurers who never rely on a single strategy, cover each other's weak spots, and are already planning to switch who will hold Alan. Because they see that Cruz is not the best choice against such a tightly coordinated enemy. Tony says they learned a lot from the last clash, so they are ready to change tactics. Tony and others assure, as long as Alan holds the enemy in close combat, they will overwhelm the target with numbers so no one can interfere in his fight. Aaron thinks that even if Dama has some trump card, he won't risk exposing his allies. Seeing this, the vampire decides to catch up with Alan herself, and Aaron realizes this is truly the smartest choice. This scene catches Tony at the perfect moment. He is preparing for the attack. He takes position, draws his weapon, and begins to gather his strength ready to deliver the decisive blow to the advancing enemies. The monsters seem to freeze or something unexpected affects them, and the hero, completely confused, whispered only, "A." Soon we see Aaron, Chris, and another ally preparing to act confidently, and the girl excitedly calls them. They are ready to turn the tide of events. We see the group uttering the spell, Perfect Prison. A giant magical circle rises over the place, completely surrounding it, and the enemies look around in confusion, not understanding what it means. Tony looks serious, and Alan irritably asks, "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" Dama calls Tony, implying that they are about to reveal the true purpose of the magical trap. Tony's group has just finished casting the Perfect Prison spell. Dama and Aaron celebrate joyfully. Aaron happily exclaimed, "We did it, Tony-san." And Tony, satisfied with the flawlessly executed plan, replied, "Yeah." Rick and Yuri finished the synthesis ritual. The cauldron suddenly began to boil fiercely and emit dazzling light. Soon a giant, frightening creature emerges from the process. Both freeze in surprise. The ground shakes from its appearance, and Rick stands stunned, looking at the creation before him. Rick looked at the huge one-eyed creature. They had just created a disgusting anicap, and was stunned by its size. He hesitated, unsure if the monster would obey him. Though worried, Rick still tries to give it an order, hoping to hear a response. The Cyclops obediently obeys the order and sits down, showing loyalty to the new master. Rick and Yuri breathed a sigh of relief. No problems, and they felt their crazy luck. they summoned a rank A Cyclops, a powerful monster with a usual drop chance of less than 2, a formidable creature now under their control. Yuri notices that the Cyclops is 6 levels higher than the goblins. Such a thing usually does not happen. She wonders if this is the work of fate itself, but before they could think further, Yuri felt someone's presence, turned around scared and shouted, "There is an uninvited guest here." Yuri and I saw through the crystal ball that a traveler was approaching our floor. He was alone, and from his weapons and armor, it was clear that it seems he is only rank B or C. Yuri says that even in a group of 10, he would have no chance against the Cyclops. The main character prepares to give the Cyclops an order, but hesitates. He begins to doubt his intentions, whether deep in his heart there is a desire to cause pain or even kill someone. For a moment he is overwhelmed with embarrassment, but he hides it and tells Yuri that it is nothing. Still in doubt, the main hero finally orders the Cyclops to attack. The monster lunged with incredible force at the adventurer who had sneaked into the dungeon, and the shocked and stunned man cannot understand why an A-rank creature ended up in a G-rank dungeon. You barely had time to blink when the Cyclops struck him brutally, and the fight ended instantly. The Cyclops dealt a savage blow to the adventurer. He spat out blood and crashed against the wall with a thud. Dust rose from the impact, and his body fell motionless to the floor. The monster stands, formidable and unyielding, as if waiting for the next command. The boy joyfully celebrates with Yuri, seeing that they gained a lot of points in the dungeon, but something gnaws at him inside. Despite the joy, he is somewhat troubled. When she asks if something is wrong, he hides it and says no. Deep down he realizes he felt no remorse for the life taken, and that frightens him. Several monster eggs hatched, revealing low-level creatures such as. The main hero, upset by bad luck, realizes that only weak monsters have come. Yuri tries to cheer him up, saying he can strengthen them through synthesis. The main hero says he does not expect the same luck, as before it is unlikely he will be able to create another Cyclops. The next moment, something suddenly burst out and slammed so hard that he and Yuri fell to the ground. A new monster appeared before them and let out a threatening roar. The creature's roar captures the hero's attention. He instantly recognizes the monster as a true giant and, stunned, is convinced there is no doubt. Yuri then admits that this is the result of his special ability. He is shocked. He realizes he possesses such a rare and dangerous power. Yuri explains that usually the synthesis ability produces monsters no more than 3 ranks higher than the materials, but the protagonist managed to create a behemoth of rank A from monsters of rank G, and this is a real wonder. Surprised, he begins to realize that he can surpass the usual limits of creation. The group implements the plan as agreed. Tony wishes them luck and adheres to the agreement with steely determination. Soon the monster fiercely rushed forward, catching everyone by surprise. Aaron, with confident laughter, watches Alan struggle and says that fighting is pointless, clearly showing that he already considers himself the winner. Tony explains that this is not just magic. The spell works on the same principle as walls or alloys. They hone the magical power of 2 people to create a much stronger barrier. They radiate confidence and firmly state that they will prove the strength of this technique to the academic community. While Alan got angry because of that trap, Alan casts a contemptuous glance at the magical barrier, confidently steps forward and says, "They underestimated my power, thinking that 2 could hold me back." He releases his power with a provocative smile, while the enemies watch attentively. The alchemist keeps the magical barrier under precise control. It self-restores even when damaged. He proudly calls it a perfect prison, and Alan reacts impatiently, criticizing their long speeches. The alchemist finally reveals the true purpose of this magical prison. Alan must capture Alan alive, without allowing any change in his life energy. Irritated, he asks what the other wants, and the other calmly explains that all the effects of the spells are needed precisely for this goal to succeed. The woman explains that inside that magical prison none of them will be able to hurt another, no matter how hard they try. To prove this, she attacks Alan directly, and he is surprised that he does not receive any harm. This proves that the magic truly prevents them from hurting each other. While Tony goes deeper to clear the main dungeon, the woman firmly says that Alan and another warrior must stay there. She says that after this, Tony is going to challenge the dungeon lord in a direct duel, wants to defeat him alone, and earn the title of hero without anyone's help. Alan almost froze upon hearing this. The master analyzed the situation and realized, if Dama's explanations are correct, this perfect prison can be destroyed by interrupting the flow of magical energy that connects the 3 wizards. Although he hesitated for a moment, he decided to act quickly and ordered the dungeon monsters to be brought into the hall, preparing to implement the plan. The master shuddered with surprise. The troll and orc that Tony fought fell too quickly. He suspects that Tony is hiding some trump card. Tony smiles and says he didn't think they would let him go alone, and the elf replies with a half-smile that it sounds like trust, but actually it's not quite so. The group says they allowed Tony to go alone because his skills inspire trust, but also to see what he would do. Meanwhile, they ordered to keep Tony busy to buy time and try to save the crews. Finally, it became clear. The assault on the dungeon was planned down to the smallest detail from the moment Albert approached them. They talk about abilities that in this world, under certain conditions, unleash incredible power. Alan waved it off with contempt, and another began to explain. For example, there is the power of instant death that only works on the night of the new moon exactly at the moment they found themselves in, and Tony clenches his fists, preparing to unleash this deadly technique. They are shocked when they realize that the activated ability is so lethal that even a scratch means instant death. An ordinary fight becomes impossible. Plan to use a potion that only works when damage is taken proves futile, and their risky strategy fails. Now the group is in despair. I have no idea what to do in this situation. They noticed it thanks to magical observation. Turns out that the opponent, without activating his special ability, has brute strength equal to an S-level adventurer like Tony. But since the other is in bad shape and the enemy's skill works perfectly, he finds himself in a difficult position. Then the ally calls the young man to pay attention, indicating that the situation is serious. They decide to make a temporary truce. The young man asks for help to destroy the barrier, promising to settle their dispute later, and the woman agrees with a confident smile. But the alchemist warns, it's useless even if they combine forces, the wall will regrow by itself, unless they meet the one who controls everything from outside. Victor suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Everyone turned their attention to him, and Alan, surprised, shouted his name. Seeing the chaos, Victor coldly said that everything had become very complicated again, implying that he was ready to intervene and possibly turn the tide of events. Victor rushed with all his strength. Catching Alan by surprise, Alan shouted his name, and the blow was so fierce that it destroyed everything around, clearly showing the stunning power of this strike. Meanwhile, somewhere someone watches the destruction and coldly says, Rika was removed like trash, worthless. Everyone notices that Alan has been distracted lately, and it is noticeable. They say that the next day they will go explore a new cave, and someone suggests that replacing one of the team members might have caused his change. One of the companions coldly says that Alan is no longer fit either as a group member or as a fighter. Then they offer him a suspicious potion. Supposedly, it improves blood circulation and relieves fatigue, but Alan is wary. Something is wrong here. Alan looks stunned as Victor suddenly makes such a decision, and watching his comrade leave, he wonders what is happening and what is the reason here. He feels the burden of Rick's loss and the fear that settled in the group. Unable to endure this, Alan confesses to Victor that he can no longer walk alongside them. In the tavern, Cruz approaches Alan. Cruz, excited, says that an old acquaintance introduced him, and celebrates the group has finally gathered together and is ready to embark on real adventures. Toasting, Alan watches carefully and quietly responds with a simple hem, silently chewing over the situation and pondering what it might mean. The officer informed Alan that the Senate intends to strip him of his hero rank, but if he passes through several dungeons as proof of his strength, they might overlook it. Despite everything, the officer asks Alan not to worry. He says he will bear the burden of the heroes, names himself if necessary. Comrades swear to support him, and he is so moved by this moment, as if his whole life flashed before his eyes. Mysterious man told Alan that he was not the only one in whom he saw the potential of a hero, but Alan has a special chance. The old man advised valuing the people you meet along the way, and when he left, Alan remained standing and thinking, who was this man really? He reflected on what he heard, and with an ironic smile thought that calling someone like him a hero is the funniest joke he has ever heard. He is confused and angry. Alan sits and listens as someone directly says that he does not deserve to be called a hero. After a heavy silence, the person leaves, but adds that he believes Alan can still become a true hero, and this shows that despite harsh judgment, he still has hope and faith in the possibility of change. Victor is wounded and gasping for breath. He gets up after breaking through the wall, laughs tiredly, realizes that now is not the time to dream peacefully, and admits to himself. Without him, Alan is a hopeless case, so despite everything, he is determined to continue helping. Victor, despite the risk, still smiles, looks at the magical field around and calls Alan, saying that he kind of expected this. He tries to ease the tension, reminding that something similar had happened before, and then it also surprised and excited his comrades. Victor, even feeling pain and complaining about his head, indifferently recalled the old trouble because of Alan, which irritated other adventurers and ended with them being surrounded by bandits. And Alan, annoyed, told him to stop talking nonsense and help kill those guys faster. Another young man threw in, the one who babbles nonsense is Alan himself, but Rick will handle it easily. Victor looks for Rick, not knowing where he disappeared, and imagines that with the golden elixir he could even break through that barrier. While Alan has confused memories, another man provokes him and tells him to stop before he reveals his soul even more, then prepares to attack, shouting that he will finish Alan completely and cleanly, taking advantage of the fact that the resistance of his body is only from the neck down. Suddenly, Victor rushed into a full-force attack and stunned everyone. The blow was so powerful that even the spectators froze and could not understand what happened at that moment. Victor's attack manages to momentarily interrupt the magic. The magical wall has not yet fallen, the mana flow was not interrupted, and Alan instantly realized there is no time, so he ordered Victor to chase Tony, who went alone to fight the dungeon master. Rick asks Alan not to rush to conquer the dungeon and to believe that the group will handle it. He stares into the void and, not even knowing where Victor is hiding, asks him to take care of Alan because he believes that Victor can fix the situation. Rick confirms that he understood the request and prepares to act. He calls Cruz and Yulia. They respond with surprise, and he says that he will now share the plan and implies that everyone will have an important role in the strategy. Rick thinks about his role to be the group's shield, always standing on the front line and taking the hits first. While he covers his comrades, he quickly realizes this allows him to recognize the type of enemy attack and come up with countermeasures. He snatches every extra second so the group can react in time. He feels such vision only comes to those who stand on the edge of death. This is exactly the role he takes on. Rick thinks about always making sure to know his strength well, how much is needed to kill, and the guilt that follows. He realizes the ability to imagine another's pain distinguishes him. But he notices, in this world, there are people who simply have no brakes. They do not restrain themselves at all. This is a completely different thing than when someone just holds a knife. Rick looked at Alan's stunning power, not about good or evil, something beyond fear and reason. Before it, ordinary people had only two paths, to be crushed and rejected or to be fascinated and follow, and he says he chose the second. He was drawn and went after her. Cruz confirms that she still has the necessary thing, and Rick says that this is the only way. The elves, surprised, ask if they are serious. Alan grumbles that they are still talking, nervously irritated by the rush, and asks why they just don't turn to the old wizard for help already, while the group organizes to carry out the plan. Alan teases Cruz, saying that her father is a pervert for making the monster call him dad, and she irritably denies it. Alan constantly mocks, sarcastically saying that the dungeon master should have full control and not fall for such simple tricks. Calling her dear dad unimpressive, they annoy Cruz. He clearly gets irritated by these provocations. Cruz got angry because Alan insulted her father and exploded with rage, while Aaron coldly remarked that in a place where no one can die, it is very easy to let your guard down. Christopher, though wounded, assures that everything is fine after all. Aaron's healing magic is excellent, and they still have plenty of time. They talk about Victor, who went ahead alone. Christopher mocks, says he is just a wooden puppet, suitable only for blows and nothing more, with no chance against the deadly attack that may come. Victor wanders the dungeon corridors, lost and anxious, because he did not remember the map. He remembers that he must stop Tony, but fatigue and confusion weigh on him. Everything is dragging on too long, and thinking about Mary, he suddenly hears a dark voice calling him to come closer. Rick appeared before Victor, smiling, recalling the times when he offered to lead him on adventures. Victor, surprised, watched as Rick took out the potion he brought so they could fight the enemy together, and handed him a bottle, assuring that if he drinks it, everything will be fine. Victor squeezes Rick, anxiously asking if he is really the same Rick. Rick smiles and answers naturally. As soon as the fight began, he panicked and hid, as always. Meanwhile, the elf watches anxiously, thinking the situation is too dangerous and worries whether Victor will be okay. Rick decisively says that only he can do this. The master just smiles and says there is nothing to worry about, but Rick insists it's not about that. He must do it with his own hands, and the plan becomes possible thanks to Victor's trust in him, because Victor values the present more than the past. At first, Rick asks if Victor is okay, and Victor, coughing, complains about the taste of the potion he had to drink, asks that next time Rick at least think a little about the poor guy who has to swallow it, but says he still trusts Rick's homemade potions. Rick laughs awkwardly and apologizes, explaining that he got so immersed in experiments that he didn't have time to think about it. Rick and Victor continue moving down the corridor, and the elf asks the master to be careful. They used some communication sheet and saw a map with their location and enemies. It was clear they had almost reached the decisive point. Rick encouraged Victor, not much left, and Victor replied, okay, ready to move forward. Rick walks ahead and thinks, although he follows Alan's orders, he still feels that he does not meet his expectations. He stops and, looking at Victor, admits that he feels as if he hurt him. The burden he carries because of this situation is visible, and Victor silently looks at Rick, showing that he understands his friend's sincerity. Rick lowers his eyes and shyly responds, yes, and Victor says that he does not expect forgiveness or anything like that and explains, this is not even an apology. He just felt that he had to say it right now. They find themselves in a tavern. Victor raises a mug, and Rick, impressed, understands the sincerity and weight of his friend's feelings. Rick and Victor froze in front of a large door. Yuli looks confidently and says, well then, Rick, with an admiring smile, encouragingly says to Victor, go ahead. When he takes a step forward, the door opens, someone appears on the other side and immediately says, you are starting the next meeting. Victor confidently walks through the gate. Rick follows him. He says that finally he is their shield and without hesitation takes on this role. Alan looks ahead, and the chapter ends with a shot where Victor steps out to meet the next opponent, ready to protect his comrades. Rick confirmed to Yuli the dungeon rules. Monsters created there disappear after death, even if the dungeon master himself does not want it. The master can digest defeated adventurers as he wishes. Yuli confirms this, and Rick is satisfied to understand that now everything is clear. Victor sincerely confirms that he understands how DP works. He has enough of the life force left in the bodies. Meanwhile, Alan watches and says with surprise that Victor still hasn't fallen, mentally noting that even such a rotten guy as he seems does not interfere with the hero. Victor faces the opponent and says that he understands his motives, but holds no personal grudge. He will stop him only because it is the simplest way to victory. The opponent mockingly says that his ideals are not so cheap as to be destroyed by a simple pawn who only follows orders, and challenges Victor to try. Victor steps towards Tony, who is preparing a deadly strike, and coldly says that at least he will end him without pain. Rick, stunned, realizes that Tony is going to use his ability to kill instantly. Rick says that in the dungeon Tony's ability is almost invincible. He easily destroys even such powerful monsters as trolls, orcs, and behemoths. He also emphasizes, even instant kill abilities have their weak spots, and this reveals the most important detail of their plan. Rick explains that the lick has the signs of the undead, and says that although weak skeletons and zombies are common, such creatures as zombie dragons do not appear naturally. Because the undead in dungeons appear only when deliberately created by magic, so this threat is very limited. Rick coldly explains that the lick does not need bodies for resurrection. He simply creates new undead from enemies who entered the dungeon, as if from raw material, and this shocks and frightens others, showing how much he calculates everything and is ready to use any resource to his advantage. Rick watches with surprise and tension as a mysterious enemy in a cloak hiding his face appears before him and Victor. The air becomes heavy, and Rick anxiously already feels that something dangerous is about to happen. Rick looks in shock as Lick, pronouncing a sinister spell, envelops Victor with dark energy. Victor trembles and his eyes widen. But in a moment he recovers, breathing heavily, and this brings relief to Rick. Burning with rage, Victor lunges at Tony with a scream and hits him so hard that Tony freezes in surprise. Tony is shocked. His ability did not work under Victor's attack, and he irritably decides that it is just a scratch. Irritation and doubt flare on Victor's face as he realizes that his instant death move did not work. He stubbornly looks at Tony and shouts that if he thinks the hero's shield will fall so easily, he is deeply mistaken. Tony stands confused and anxious, not understanding what is happening, while Victor remains unshakable, showing that he cannot be defeated by such a simple trick. Victor, shirtless and beaten, calmly says that he was always ready to die if it meant protecting his comrades. Mary desperately begs him to at least take better care of himself, and Rick looks serious. Victor, with a calm gaze, says that he has no talent like only his own body, which he could always give, and still he never considered it a weakness. For him, the main thing is the landscape he sees through a friend's eyes, and that is also precious to him. Then he says that if for the sake of that vision, giving his life will not be sad or painful, and he is ready to do it without regret. Victor, fallen and wounded, lies and asks himself if that was enough. He believes that it was the only way to give everything he had. Because it does not matter whether that vision belongs to him or a land, important thing is that he gave everything he could. Meanwhile, Alan watches and tells Yuri that he will defeat him and become the strongest dungeon master. Yuri, with a burning and determined expression, shouts that he also has something incredibly valuable, courage, to give everything just to see the vision he desires. When he utters this, memories flash for a moment, images of those he wants to protect, and it is then that you feel how powerful his desire is. On the balcony, Yuri talks with the old sage. With a serious expression, Yuri asks why he recommended Alan as the hero. He is clearly interested. He wants to understand why Alan was chosen for such an important role. The old man just silently observes, pondering this. The old man calmly explains to Yuri that alchemists do not judge things as good or evil. He says that Alan, although now fallen out of favor, has absolute power and almost destructive self-confidence traits belonging only to those who walk the path of domination, and the old man admits that he only led Alan to where he could unleash all his talent. Yuri, impressed, admits that she understands she had seen Alan's power with her own eyes. Finally, the old man holds something in his palms as if about to show or give something extremely important. The boy looks surprised because he realizes someone's flame has not yet gone out. The confident girl extends a potion to him and orders him to drink it, saying that her father prepared it exactly for this case. Although hesitant, the boy silently accepted the potion, and she mockingly teased him, asking why he was so afraid. The boy froze the potion was golden, and he irritably asks how this can help him right now, outraged that the monsters had something for adventurers, while the girl mockingly laughs, calls him little head, and says that even without explanations it is clear why they need it. He exploded with indignation, tightly clutching the potion. The girl loses patience and hisses, "Shut up and drink this potion quickly, this is the maximum help we can give." She asks if now is the time to worry about nonsense. She hints that maybe even his ability will work if he drinks it. Embarrassed and surprised, the boy asks what exactly she meant. The boy thinks confusedly whether the potion can restore his ability. He recalls that he once drank something similar and it did not work, so he concludes, if the power were to return, it would have returned then. Meanwhile, irritated, he cannot get rid of the thought. That girl knows too much about his ability and this makes him even more embarrassed. The warrior said irritably that the other made him tremble and began to doubt whether he should really follow the plan, knowing nothing. Looking at the golden potion, he remembers Rick and associates it with something that deeply troubles him, while another observes and begins to recognize something in that man. He remembered how that man never considered him an equal and always treated him like an experiment. Even beneath the gentle smile in his gaze there was something rotten, as if he saw everyone only as material, so he decided to drive him away because he realized that interest was one-sided and empty, and it destroyed the honor that once existed between them. Alan shouts in fury, calling himself a hero Alan Cole, and insists that he reached the summit solely by his own efforts, relying on no one. And he threatens to kill anyone who dares to despise him. Some simply say that it seems he has completely lost his mind. The girl delivers a message from her father. Father said they don't care about the heroes who will die there. She says coldly, if Alan doesn't swallow his pride and drink the potion, he will die without even proving who he really is. Alan, engulfed in rage and pride, shouts that he is the strongest hero and decides to drink the potion. Meanwhile, others watch in awe at the courage and strength beginning to emanate from him. Alan, engulfed by the power of the potion, finds himself surrounded by wild energy. The slaughter is about to begin. Alan destroyed the magical prison with a single blow. He left Christopher in shock. He is laughing. Calling others weak and insane, he insisted that theory or magic is a useless thing if there is no real power behind them. Alan screamed wildly that his desires and thoughts surpassed all their calculations, and that he is different, strong, and incredible. Laughing wildly, Christopher realizes that the effect arose from the potion he took before the resurrection skill, and coldly asks Alan if he managed to see his whole life flash before his eyes. Alan coldly looks at his opponent, raises a finger, and says that he will not even give him time to scream or say his last words, let him try to die without strong pain. In a moment power flared, and he rushed into a full attack, leaving the enemy in shock. Tony says he might make mistakes if they blind him so much. Without him, who in the group is the ace? Breaking this magical prison was almost death for those who remained. Aaron and Christopher were already moving to the next phase of the plan, and Aaron's last resistance only replaced one doomed person with another. A mighty spirit begins to awaken in Alan's body, using him as a vessel, and follows their pack. The King of the Earth Spirit appears a trump card that Alan reveals with a confident smile, realizing the full weight of this summoning. Alan grabs Aaron, tortures her cruelly, shouts that she is a traitor, demands explanations, and then kills her. Aaron suffers in despair and pain, knowing that he will die right here. Alan continues to brutally torture Aaron, accusing her of selling him for money and mocking the fact that she invests her earnings in her devices. Aaron resolutely responds, saying that he underestimates what it means to be an alchemist. Explaining that modern alchemy is the result of research accumulated over generations, including her work, Alan irritably presses, does she still want to look for excuses? Alan shouts that Aaron will die there alone, no one will recognize her work, and her research will be cut off at that very moment. Aaron, wounded, asks through the pain why this is so, and says that it is Alan's very heart that rejects what is happening. She says the one who overcomes him is an alchemist, and this leaves Alan puzzled and irritated and does not understand what she means. Alan cruelly attacks Aaron, irritated that she continues to say what he did not ask for, and calls her worthless until the very end. Aaron, even after falling and wounded, thinks to herself that she was foolish to say what she said. Before dying, she quietly asks, "Let someone take care of Thish," understands that leaving everything in his hands would be unfair. The confrontation does not subside. Alan coldly watches as another figure intervenes, takes Aaron's body, and calls Alan a tasteless man, and Alan himself ironically asks whether he wants to lecture him or just pity him. The blonde boy silently watches, pondering whether it was really right after all. Everything happened exactly as they said, and with a firm gaze he decides to act. But Alan delivers a fierce blow to him, showing a mad smile, and accuses him of being just like them. Alan throws himself with all his might at the enemy, but the latter dodges at the last moment. The girl, stunned, sees Alan has become even faster and stronger than before, and this alarms her because the danger is only growing. Alan fiercely attacks the enemy, remembering how he was deceived on the previous floor. The opponent smiles confidently and taunts, "Do you really think this is child's play?" Alan responds with a mad look now the fight has become much more serious. Alan jumps with all his strength, trying to deliver a deadly blow to the adversary. But the other met him, harshly hitting him on the ground so hard that a huge crater formed at the impact site. The opponent sees that brute force rules everywhere and decides to change tactics. He releases dark energy and aims it at Alan, who prepares to react to the new attack with surprise. Even under pressure, Alan does not stop. He continues the offensive, while the enemy resorts to tricks to throw him off balance. Irritated, he accuses the opponent of still resorting to dirty tricks, showing that he does not intend to retreat. Alan stunned the opponent with lightning-fast reaction, much faster than anyone she had faced, and impressed, she admits, he is not like the others. Alan, determined to finish quickly, launches an attack and shouts to her, "Die." Alan feels that he needs to retreat and observe more carefully to find a gap. Meanwhile, the woman reacts with surprise to his movement. Suddenly, several monsters appear, advancing across the battlefield and intensifying the tension of the confrontation. Alan becomes increasingly irritated, watching the enemy destroy his bats one by one. Meanwhile, the enemy remains calm and watches, letting Alan scream in despair, wondering how many more he will have to knock down before he finally dies. Cruz begins to drown in the situation, and the group realizes, despite all her efforts, the risk is too great. The master decisively orders an immediate retreatal straight to the exit of the hall before something worse happens. The group tries to escape, but the hero, confident and mocking, watches them flee, despises their efforts, and calls it a futile game. Suddenly, a mysterious distortion appears on the ground, and he, stunned and frightened, asks himself, "What is this?" The girl is thrown far away by the army of skeletons that responded to her command in the air. There she thanks them for the help and apologizes with a smile, while the hero looks, surprised by her successful escape. The girl returns to the group, exhausted but safe. The leader praises Cruz for a great job. She, stunned, asks who that boy is, still shocked by the absurd power he displayed. One comrade explains that it is Alan's skill, although he thinks it is unfair and too strong. The group is intensely arguing about why Alan's ability did not activate immediately after he swallowed the potion. Some recall that even under Cruz's pressure, he showed no signs of awakening his power. They say his ability awakens only in battles against enemies of at least S rank, and only at critical moments to turn the tide of battle. This is how Alan always guaranteed himself victory, keeping all his power to himself and unleashing it only at the limit. They understood the reason why Alan's power did not work was hidden in the special conditions of his gift, and recognizing the pattern, they found out that earlier Alan could use it only under the same conditions. The master was nearby and became the necessary trigger. The young man confidently smiled and stated that it is precisely the master's presence that determines the awakening of Alan's power. They suspect Alan probably had already drunk the golden elixir created by the alchemist Dema before meeting Cruz. It was not seen that after Cruz defeated him once, he drank any other potion. The group concluded that to awaken Alan's mighty power, the seal had to be broken, but anxiety still lingers in the air, a sign that another problem is hidden behind this. They instantly realize Alan is breaking the dungeon walls and rushing forward without stopping. This complicated everything even more. They anxiously think about the accumulated mistakes since Alan and the others entered first Dema's automaton that broke through the dungeon, then Tony and others who betrayed each other, and now they rack their brains on how to finally bring down Alan. They finally understood. Their third mistake was underestimating how long Alan's power would last. It lasts much longer than they thought. Yet the group leader draws a conclusion. This confirms one of his hypotheses. And without hesitation, with a confident voice, he tells the others that they will be able to defeat Alan. The scene shows the group analyzing the situation, and the leader concludes that although Alan's ability is a powerful weapon, this could become his greatest weakness, and Alan has not yet noticed it. This makes the leader smile confidently, and someone asks in surprise what he means. Victor, full of determination, rushes at the enemy and delivers a powerful blow with all his strength. His strike echoes across the battlefield, astonishing those watching from afar. Victor steps forward without hesitation and lands a direct kick on the opponent, pushing him against the wall so hard that the impact point cracks, and a quick, precise jerk clearly shows his intention to end the fight as soon as possible. Victor suddenly lunged and with an accurate strike sent the enemy flying. The enemy tries to understand what happened, confused by the unexpected situation. He watched as Victor retreated, giving no sign of his next move, and the warrior in despair could not believe his eyes as the opponent got up again and again, though the wounds should have been fatal. Determined to finish this, he decides to aim straight at the head, hoping that this will finally stop him. Suddenly, Alan appeared, interrupting the fight with another provocative smile, and asked if he could join the fight. As soon as he appears, everyone tenses up, instantly feeling the danger coming from him. Alan coldly mocked, saying that Christopher and Aaron were already stains on the dungeon floor for believing fools. He incites the group, assuring that very soon he will send them to the same fate, laughing with contempt, and steps forward to attack. During the fight, Alan tirelessly taunts his opponent, teasing as soon as he notices his irritation and cannot believe. The enemy's face lacks the usual cold mask. Alan's opponent gathers his last strength and throws a powerful strike with his magical saber, believing that one precise stab will bring him down, while Alan confidently watches the attack approach, as if completely ignoring this desperate lunge. Alan effortlessly blocks the strike, enveloping himself in a powerful energy aura that distorts everything around. His opponent looks on in shock. Even the magically charged strike did not break Alan's defense, who remains calm and unshakable, ready to counterattack. Alan looks at his opponent and coldly says that his skill is a deadly technique that kills with one blow. But saying that in his current state it will not affect him, Alan confidently says he cannot even imagine one of the opponent's attacks hitting him. Easily deflecting blows and completely dominating the fight, Alan looks at his opponent with contempt and says, "This is what a true hero looks like." As if a person with such a stunning presence unreachable, while the other stands speechless, Alan ironically makes it clear that this level is too high for someone like him and sarcastically asks, "Now do you understand?" He turns to face his opponent and angrily accuses him. "You have no right to call yourself a hero," recalling comrades who chose to fight for his dream, saying he was ready to move forward even over their bodies. For him, a true hero earns the trust of allies and becomes a beacon of hope that is exactly what he wanted. The character disdainfully rejects the idea that a hero should trust comrades, saying that as long as someone relies on uncertain others, he will never become a true hero. For him, a hero is not friendship, but overwhelming power that crushes everything in its path. The warrior arrogantly says that he trusts no one, only his own strength, and rejects any idea of heroism based on bonds. Another character is worried and outraged, seeing how someone so powerful distorts the meaning of what it means to be a hero. The warrior, full of determination, decides that he must correct the distortion created by the enemy. Convinced, he swears to uproot evil from its root. He committed evil with his own hands, without hesitating for a moment about what he had to do. Tony Richards reads the news about the hero Derek, who conquered a rank A dungeon, and Tony contemplates with obvious disdain. He believes that it is not worth wasting time caring for animals while living in the same era as a hero who radiates pride and ambition. Tony sits in a tavern among peasants and says that he does not want to miss the chance to live in such an incredible era where heroes from legends still fight. Others mock him, saying that even heroes from the village are rare exceptions, and his dream of becoming a hero is just a joke. Tony loudly says, "A hero is one who fearlessly steps into the unknown." A mysterious old man appeared, praised the boy's spirit, hugged him tightly, and said that this is exactly what he loves to see. Tony, surprised, asked, "Who are you?" and thought that this meeting would completely change his fate. The old traveler explains that he recruits people of all kinds as candidates for heroes, and the rest are shocked. He chose Tony, saying he is just a pastor's son without any talent. And the old man says that if he had to highlight something, he would point to Tony's eyes. Full of determination, Tony receives praise from the old man. He always looks beyond what is around, with dreams that reach far beyond. He accepts Lord Lasbert's invitation without hesitation. Soon on the road, the caravan is attacked by bandits. This forces everyone to prepare for battle. Tony heads to the capital and befriends two other candidates, the mage Ashbourne, ambitious and determined to become stronger, and the warrior Eudrin, rough but charismatic and skilled with a sword. On the way they train together, tease each other, and bond tightly. Tony impresses his comrades with rapid progress, mastering basic spells and showing determination to rise in the rank of swordsman. Yudrin, noticing potential in him, suggests that Tony help him create his own faction when they reach the capital, and this brings them even closer. Tony hears Yudrin say that many want to join the hero squad because it is immediately fame and power. Tony, with a serious look, says he does not want to rely on the hero's fame. He strives to rise by his own merits and show determination to conquer everything by his own strength. Tony and Yudrin part ways, firmly shaking hands. They swore to give everything and even compete to see who would become the next hero. Later, Tony arrives at the capital, where he is warmly welcomed by a nobleman recommended by Albest, and when he asks his name, thus begins his true journey. Tony embarrassedly admits that he does not like to talk about his past, and the hero asks him to rest because training will start the next day. Meanwhile, the girl mocks him, asking if he is some kind of country bumpkin who is helped only because of a sad past, and Tony just looks on indifferently. The girl opens Tony's eyes. The hero's image is a farce invented by the rich and influential, who bought the merits of others' exploits and molded the perfect hero to control influential adventurers. She adds that even the famous Derek is actually the son of a nobleman who uses his power only to protect the interests of the elite, and when Tony shockingly asks why they would go so far for some adventurer, she looks at him coldly and shows how naive it is to think otherwise. Tony falls silent for a moment, digesting that harsh truth. Then he decides this means he must become a true legend on his own, even if he has to crawl through the mud. His goal has not changed. He will prove his worth with his own hands. The girl looks surprised as determination is visible in his eyes. Tony shows stubbornness, and the woman looking at him cannot help but smile. She admits that she does not hate this side of him. Soon Derek appeared, gathered his group, and with a serious gleam in his eyes announced, they will go explore a new S-rank dungeon, a trial that will be difficult even for them. Tony notices that Derek only wants to gain even more fame, repeating the same old scheme again and again. You will reunite with Tony again, and cannot believe that this time they are on the same team. They exchanged a few words, and Euro noted that Tony stands firm even on an S-rank mission. He does not hesitate. Tony responded weakly, and Euron, admiringly praising his courage, added that the group of heroes still impresses him. Tony teases Euron, saying that if he relaxes too much, he will never reach their level after all. They constantly gained experience as adventurers, but deep down Tony believes in him and thinks that if it's Euron, he will definitely manage. Soon in the very chamber of the dungeon master of rank S, a decisive battle unfolds. Euron, severely wounded, asks himself if this is the end and calls for help. Tony rushes to him, but Euron already says there is nothing to be done, although he himself dealt the final blow to the monster. It was mutual destruction. They arrive too late to save him. Tony's gaze fills with pain as he realizes that his friend has died. The knight looks at the battlefield strewn with bodies and despairingly asks himself, is that small group all that remains of the elite team? He complains, if the king finds out about such heavy losses, there will be serious consequences. While they are ordered to leave the dead behind, Tony looks at the situation with a tense and outraged gaze. Tony watched as the knight contemptuously said he would tell the king everything, reducing deaths to mere numbers. Shocked, he could not understand if a hero should behave like that, and looking at that man, his face filled with indignation, the knight noticed the look and, irritated, shouted whether Tony had lost his mind looking at him like that. Tony, wounded and dirty, firmly holds his sword, and with a determined look loudly says he wants to be a true hero, then looks at the one sitting on the throne, and without hesitation replies that he wants the title of hero. Tony gazed in awe at the man before him, who was covered by incredible power, and could not help but wonder if this was the perfect hero the king wanted. The main character is stunned to learn that he has a special ability, and he has the thought to be a dungeon master. Maybe this is his true destiny. Yuri encourages him. Everyone has their place where they truly shine. Filled with determination, he immediately decides to take on another synthesis. The protagonist looks at the huge colossus and thoughtfully recalls the difficulties he faced with this creature before. When Yuri asks what happened, he waved it off saying nothing. But the monster's expression and the roar that bursts from it shows that the memory is still alive and strong. The beast fiercely lunged at the group, forcing the warriors to hold it back with all their might. Meanwhile, now Rick desperately mixes the potion under the pressure of his comrades. Despite the raging chaos, he says that he has almost finished, urgently preparing the contents. Finally, the potion is ready. At the decisive moment, Rick throws it to Alan. Alan grabs it and gathers his spirit as the giant approaches in fury. Without hesitation, he swallows the contents before the monster, ready to take the blow. Alan's group stands against the raging giant approaching. Rick finishes preparing the potion, throws it to Alan, he catches it, and with a determined gleam in his eyes prepares to counterattack. He drinks the contents and instantly delivers a powerful blow that deeply slashes the monster. After the battle, the behemoth's body falls to the ground with a dull thud. The team finally celebrates the victory with relief. Everyone praises Alan for his strength and skill, enthusiastically singing his praises even during the celebration, while the main hero watches the scene detachedly, with a gaze full of doubts. Rick runs in, out of breath. He is late for the meeting with the group. Upon entering, he hurriedly apologizes, but is told that everything about the next dungeon has already been decided. In response, he firmly places a tray with vials on the table and surprises everyone. Rick says that he completely devoted himself to experiments immediately after the previous mission. From the materials of the behemoth, they crafted potions with individually customized effects. He shows the mixtures to the group and hands Victor a stamina potion to recover faster and defend stronger. Victor, although he considers it an exaggeration, still acknowledges its usefulness and calls Rick a potion fanatic. Rick tries to show Alan the potion, but he is sharply interrupted. Alan disdainfully pushes the vial away and says it is useless. He glared fiercely at Rick and sternly scolded him, asking if he does not understand his role in the group. Alan criticizes Rick, who calls him a nobody and says that he is in the group only because of the golden potions. Even when Victor tries to defuse the situation, the group stubbornly insists that they have a mage and a healer, and that they do not need to rely on ordinary potions. Rick forces a smile, agreeing, Mua, but deep down he remembers the times when his skills were vital. Now he feels how his importance in the team diminishes day by day. An artificial symbol that lives only by fear and power. Overcome with despair, he screams in pain and asks himself, can a true hero even exist in this world? Tony freezes from the cold words of the enemy, who raises a weapon and says, there is nothing emptier than ideals without results, and his name echoes, emphasizing the weight of that harsh truth thrown at him. Having overcome all the traps on the way, the group finally moved into the deepest part of the dungeon. The return of that ability only confirmed that the real danger still awaited them ahead. Only the dungeon master remained to be defeated, hidden at the end of that dark corridor, and to face the true ancestor who watched everything from the shadows. Even standing before the defeated enemy, he felt that he still did not have enough strength to face the real target. The deeper they advanced into the dungeon, the stranger the feeling made the silence between them increasingly heavy. Just as he was about to leave, he was interrupted again by that persistent man who refused to give up. He fell to the ground, exhausted to the limit, but still clung to a dream that was impossible to reach while trying to hide his feelings. The fear in his eyes could no longer be ignored, the further he advanced. The clearer it became that he was only pretending not to notice the truth standing before him, and at that moment, he finally understood the truth he had been avoiding all along. The greatest enemy is not a monster nor a hero destined to defeat him, but the fear hidden inside him, and the more he ran from this truth, the more death consumed him completely. He was overwhelmed by rage and confusion. He could no longer accept the reality that stood before his eyes. Even after the death of that man, the strange feeling still did not leave, as if something was still wrong, and the more he tried to ignore it, the stronger the unrest inside him became. Although no one admitted the truth directly, everyone already suspected that after the meeting with the dungeon master something had changed, and the return of that ability only intensified the doubts what really happened there. But still, they decided to leave everything behind and move forward. When the fight finally ended, he left behind a fallen man in the grave silence of the dungeon. The bodies scattered throughout the dungeon slowly began to disappear, and huge piles of points rained down on the survivors. Each defeated enemy dropped increasingly larger rewards until the total of this hunt grew to an absurd amount of DP. Even despite all the surprises in the dungeon, the total was better than anyone could have imagined. The points earned were enough to complete the final preparations, even with the return of that dangerous ability. And although the plans moved forward, one doubt still hung in the air, whether it was worth sending someone again into the dragon's chamber. Unlike the others, he decided to abandon the plan while he still could. While everyone believed that the dragon's power would make the group invincible, he saw something much more dangerous behind that confidence. He felt they underestimated the true power of human will, and such a mistake could destroy everything. At first glance, Alan's ability seemed to grant an absurd level of strength, almost divinely raising all his attributes. But behind this unstable power hides. There was a much more complex secret, spending time in the same group and observing everything they FG. Finally, they concluded that the true heart of that ability is self-affirmation. The true power of that ability was born from Alan's own belief in himself. The more his confidence grew, the more powerful he became, as if he had no limits. His ability transformed his self-perception into reality, allowing him to reach absurd levels of strength until his faith wavered. Even understanding how this ability worked, it was still hard to say who among them was truly stronger. After all, Alan always believed that he was special. He approached every fight as if losing was impossible, but among all the options they analyzed, only Victor seemed capable of shaking that absolute confidence that held his power. An adventurer in battle usually thinks only about how to survive and return alive after the fight. But Victor had completely abandoned such thoughts. Ready to die during that attack, he entered a dangerous state. A person who no longer fears losing their life can unleash power that exceeds all expectations. While everyone was looking for a way out, a cruel decision slowly began to mature. Confronted with that unstoppable force, they realized that the only way to stop Victor, it would mean pulling him down, along with the fire dragon itself. And at that moment, the fate of that battle was finally decided. Just as the plan seemed final, everything turned upside down again. To everyone's surprise, he took responsibility to fight Alan alone. Without hesitation, he decided to face that monster with his own hands, although he understood how senseless this choice was. Soon the newspapers spread rumors throughout the city. Former group members began accusing the hero. Strange actions and increasingly disturbing changes became apparent. Gradually, the image everyone once had of him began to collapse before people's eyes. With each new testimony, former comrades in arms began to tell about the abuse and unbearable pressure they endured fighting alongside the hero, and stories of humiliation, unfair dismissals, and even deaths due to his tactics spread everywhere. Soon people stopped considering the former adventurers criminals. They began to be seen as victims of someone obsessed with the outcome. The hero's reputation rapidly began to crumble as rumors spread among the people. For many, it looked like a carefully planned trap, an attempt to destroy Alan and free the place so that a new hero could rise in his stead. Meanwhile, chaos grew behind the scenes, and it became increasingly clear. The image he had built was about to fall apart. Not even having time to catch their breath, they soon found themselves facing another monstrous threat. After so many battles with dangerous enemies, now they had to deal with a giant fire-breathing dragon blocking their path. He, though irritated, went forward without hesitation to engage in the absurd battle again. With every step, the dungeon seemed crazier and crazier. Amid this chaos, a real fiery dragon appeared before them, completely overturning the battlefield, and, sensing the presence of that absurd creature, everyone suddenly realized that this was not just an ordinary dungeon, but part of something much greater, connected to the true ancestors. As soon as the dragon attacked, the battle instantly exploded with furious speed. While one endured the monster's onslaught from the front, the other rushed forward across the battlefield. The field prowling in search of a fatal gap. Amidst the flames and destruction, the confrontation with the monster finally began in earnest. In the midst of the fierce fight, the dragon unleashed a devastating blast of flame that engulfed everything around. Surrounded by flames, Alan continued to advance forward, not retreating. The pressure of the battle rose and became increasingly deadly, and before this absurd devastation, everyone realized one mistake and death is instant. Even before the avalanche of dragon fire, Alan kept moving forward, showing no fear. But everyone knew this creature was not like previous enemies. Even his crude strength would not be enough to easily overcome those invisible flames. Gradually, it became clear before that battle he was preparing something much more dangerous. Looking at the dragon before them, Victor recalled an old story he once heard. It was said that dragons always lie near treasures, as if consumed by their own greed. But he felt that the legend hid something much deeper than the simple stories shared by travelers. Carefully studying the dragon, he finally realized the true secret of its flame was hidden in the creature's very body. The metals accumulated inside reacted in a special way, producing a flammable gas that could ignite that devastating fire, and steadying his breath, releasing this gas in a straight line. The dragon turned every attack into a deadly explosion. The dragon's flame appeared at the very moment its fangs sparked, which could ignite the gas it exhaled. Everything standing before that line of flame was instantly destroyed by the explosion. And the most terrifying thing was that fire dragons had an absurd resistance to their own heat, so in battle they became even more fearsome. Unlike ordinary dragons, this creature wrapped itself in flames, releasing gas through its pores and igniting it by the friction of its scales, resulting in an absurd protective fiery barrier that made approaching it almost impossible. Even understanding how this ability worked, they still could not find a way to break through that wall of fire. Only when Alan carefully looked into the flames covering the dragon's body did he finally notice the protection was not perfect. Amid the chaos of battle, he began to see the weakness hidden behind those merciless flames. And at that very moment, he decided to act before it was too late. For him, the whole mission was just a test, a way to measure how truly worthy someone was of the title of hero. After years during which he created countless adventurers, he finally admitted his method had limits. Ultimately, he believed the hero's shine is only a temporary phenomenon, inevitably fading over time. When the scandal around the hero began to spread, some people started to see the harsh truth hidden behind the crowd's reaction. For them, people did not really desire the hero's victory, but rather craved the fall of the one they considered evil, and it was this desperate desire that eventually united everyone in search of a new symbol to believe in. Tired of the idea of heroes and their inevitable fall, he decided to completely reject this symbol of hope and instead create a new demon king who could rule everything through fear. But even before the darkness began to descend, there was. Until the very end, there were those who desperately fought to be believed, watching the dragon engulfed in flames. He could not help but notice how incredibly cautious these creatures were. Even possessing such destructive power, dragons still preferred to keep their distance. They destroyed enemies without exposing themselves to danger, and it was when Alan understood this cowardly tactic that he had a real breakthrough in that battle. Even knowing how absurd the situation was, Alan decided to move forward with the only plan he could imagine at that moment. Unfearing the consequences, he placed the final decision in Victor's hands and resolutely moved forward, ready to stake everything on that battle. And before that impulsive choice, they had nothing left but to move forward to the very end. Relying only on his own courage, Alan rushed at the dragon without hesitation. Moving towards danger, Victor decided to support him until the very end. He decided to risk his own life on this crazy bet, and so the two of them set off together towards the monster engulfed in flames. Even covered in dragon fire, he moved forward, showing no fear of pain. While everyone in shock watched this suicidal assault, it seemed that after meeting Rick, something in him had completely changed. And for the first time in a very long time, the torment could no longer stop him. Watching the fight continue, they began to understand that everything was happening exactly as Alan wanted. Leaving that man alive, they deliberately gave the perfect chance to buy time and get rid of the hero as efficiently as possible, and behind this cunning game it became clear. Someone had already foreseen the chaos that was coming. Faced with that desperate situation, Victor's transformation into an undead became the only possible choice to continue the fight with Alan. Deep inside he knew, this battle had become much more personal for him than just a victory over the enemy. This confrontation became his chance to finally face his mistakes and overcome the past, even if he did not quite understand human feelings. She still faithfully followed the decisions of her master. For her, it was enough to trust this decision and move forward without doubt. After all, although she was just a dungeon spirit, human feelings and desires still raged within her, which remained incomprehensible to her. Observing everything that was happening, they began to understand. It was these changing emotions, which are hard to explain, that are the true human essence. As if it were the willpower itself, sudden impulses and contradictory feelings that pulled people forward, and perhaps it was this unpredictable human spark that made us so special. Watching the battle come to an end, he finally believed that he had found what he had been searching for all this time. In Alan and Victor, he saw perfect victims to achieve his final goal. And at that moment, the fight ceased to be just a struggle for survival, it became part of something much greater. Even without feeling pain, Alan began to realize that the dragon's flame was consuming all the oxygen around them. Surrounded by flames and almost suffocating, he understood that the battle had finally reached its limit. Mid the flames, Victor without hesitation rushed forward and placed his body before the dragon's attack, even on the brink of collapse, deciding to protect Alan until the very end, becoming a shield in this desperate battle. In a mad impulse, Alan threw the very fire dragon at the enemy. The giant was fiercely thrown across the entire battlefield, and the clash became even more chaotic and absurd. Overcome by his own rage, Alan decided to simultaneously detonate all the dragon flames, watching that suicidal attack. Finally, they understood the dragon's weakest spot, its excessive obsession with protecting what it considered treasures. Alan finally realized all the dragon's power existed only to protect what the dragon valued above all else. Behind the destructive flame and the accumulated treasures, this creature was merely a coward hiding behind his own strength. Facing that situation, Alan found himself captive to a distant memory. In the midst of snowy silence, memories pulled him back to an event 7 years ago, still deeply etched in his soul. 7 years ago, far north of Al-Ra, lay a lonely snowy land, the land of Golders. It was in that distant land that one of the most important memories in Alan's life was born. Back then in his native family, Alan was treated with open contempt. He was forced to do hard labor, and others constantly looked down on him. Even being the son of an influential commander, he lived in isolation within the castle walls. He was treated as if he were nobody. In Alan's castle, he was constantly mocked and called useless both servants and his relatives. Not reacting to provocations, he silently endured everything while everyone considered him a slow and talentless boy. While others were humiliating Alan, suddenly an unknown boy appeared before them, and he could not bear what he saw. Passing by, he swiftly knocked one of the men to the ground, and instantly the entire atmosphere of that place changed. Not allowing Alan to be insulted, the boy rushed at them without hesitation. Easily stunning everyone, he demanded only one thing: an immediate apology. Although rage completely consumed him, the boy was stopped in time. He did not get too far. Having driven the men away, he simply thanked Alan for the help, as if it were just a trifle. That unexpected blow, the first time Alan truly fell before someone, trying to understand what had happened. He began to feel that there was something both strange and familiar in that castle. Not much time passed. Alan learned that the boy's name was Victor, and that he would live in that castle for some time. Not fully understanding what was happening, he just stood and watched as that strange guest appeared, who would soon turn his life upside down. While he was speaking in the castle, Alan heard stories about the barbarian people from the north and their sea raids. However, surprisingly, the kingdom finally turned its gaze to the south. This completely changed the course of the war, on that continent, engulfed by dungeons and monsters. Eventually, the northern barbarians turned for help to the lands they once wanted to invade. And to seal this alliance, they sent Victor, the youngest son of the barbarian king, to the castle as a political hostage. Even being a member of the royal family, Victor clearly did not look like a person raised with care or affection. While they discussed how he got to the castle, the conversation soon turned to the wounds on Alan's face after the battle. Although many saw Alan as a weak person without ambition, some saw in him a rare talent deep inside. His strength was that he no longer expected anything from life, so he could fight without hesitation and fear. One day Victor found Alan alone near the frozen river again, alienated from everyone. Even pretending to be a provocateur, he eventually started the conversation himself, and slowly approached that lonely boy, walking through the forest. Victor realized, although everyone around despised Alan, he still avoided creating problems. Amid the tension in the territory and constant fear of monsters, Alan simply continued to endure everything silently. Victor did not understand Alan's attitude and wondered, why does he just accept everything and not react at all? For him it was clear, if he continued to endure those humiliations and did not fight back, it would change nothing at all. While they were talking, several soldiers appeared. They provoked Victor and accused him, saying that it was precisely because of his presence here that there were problems. Even surrounded by provocations and disrespect, Alan again tried to control the situation so that it would not get out of hand. The soldiers did not stop humiliating Victor and even drew weapons to provoke him even more. But seeing this, Alan felt that the situation was finally about to explode. As soon as the sword was pointed at him, Victor reacted instantly, without hesitation. With one swift movement, he knocked a soldier off his feet in front of everyone, instantly put an end to all provocations. Consumed by rage, Victor clearly showed that he didn't care about excuses or anyone's status. To him, those men were simply weak. That's why they were so easily defeated. In the whirl of confusion, a monstrous creature suddenly emerged before everyone. While panic spread around, Alan shockingly realized that a troll had appeared right in the middle of the village. As soon as the troll attacked, the village plunged into chaos, and everyone began to flee desperately. But instead of retreating, Victor went straight at the monster without hesitation. Standing before the troll, Victor resolutely declared that he was not one of those cowards who attack only the weak. Unfearing of danger, he went alone to meet the monster face to face. While Alan learned to endure everything silently among the icy northern lands, Victor grew up placing courage above all. Even when a monster appeared before him, much stronger than him, he continued to move forward and did not retreat. Even seeming reckless, Victor continued to fight the troll right in the middle of the snow. And at that decisive moment, Alan finally noticed the perfect chance to act. Even after the fight with the troll, Alan could not understand why Victor insisted so much on meeting with him. He saw no point in reacting or expecting better from life. Deep down, he believed he would never become someone important. Although Alan seemed to everyone a man without ambition, Victor saw in him a potential that no one else in the castle noticed. Preparing to set off for the capital, he said that Alan would easily gain recognition if he began accumulating achievements by defeating monsters. In his mind, Alan only had to prove his strength, and everyone would stop despising him, maybe even one day he would become king. Before leaving, Victor told Alan that he could still become a hero. But alone in the snow, Alan just silently stared at his hand. Even when despair consumed him, Alan decided to fight to his last breath. Although his body was falling apart in the snow, he only sought to keep the spark that Victor had kindled in his heart. After the fierce battle, Victor carried Alan in his arms, watching as the dragon fell defeated, even exhausted and on the brink of death. Alan still managed to call Victor's name one last time. Victor finally understood. Alan was not cold or arrogant, he had simply long lost faith in his life. Outraged by this, Victor refused to tolerate such an attitude, and without hesitation, continued moving forward to save him. For the first time, Alan looked at everything with eyes full of shock. When the battle ended and the target finally turned to ashes, Rick simply watched silently, thinking about Victor. For him, that fight alongside the fire dragon was the perfect spectacle, exactly the ending he dreamed of seeing. Even when everything was over, Rick realized he did not regret Victor's death at all. This realization began to scare him. The feeling was like losing an ordinary monster. It made him doubt, was he gradually ceasing to behave like a human? Recalling the deaths of Victor and the fire dragon, Rick frankly admitted he envied them. Having observed countless adventurers for years, he understood. Both of them died fulfilling exactly the role they believed in that world. Alan realized that most adventurers risked their lives in search of glory, treasures, or recognition. But in the end, only a few truly managed to become someone important in this cruel world. Rick thought about how Victor decided to burn his own life for what he believed in an act that only a few would dare to do. Meanwhile, Yuri was still trying to understand this feeling. Finally, she asked Rick what the goal of his life would be from now on. Rick admitted that he still did not fully understand even himself, but that was exactly why Alan was a mystery to him that could not be ignored. He decided that he would defeat him and finally get to the answer he had been desperately searching for. Walking alone through the huge empty castle, Alan began to recall Victor's words. For the first time, he felt how strange and unusual it was to continue alone, without someone constantly urging him on or trying to pull him back to reality. Even trying to convince himself that he was not afraid, Alan began to realize the truth he had tried not to see. Deep down he knew, the only person capable of defeating him was neither a monster nor a warrior. But Rick, the alchemist who kept shaking everything inside himself, consumed by his own ambition. Alan began to perceive everyone around him simply as tools that could be used and discarded for the sake of his goal. But as soon as he rushed forward, full of determination to crush anyone who stood in his way, Rick simply disappeared before his eyes, leaving Alan confused and enraged. One day when Alan finally met Rick, again he was completely shaken when he saw him come out of the flames without fear. With a strange smile on his face, Rick just teased Alan as if he had just come face to face with a real monster. In the whirl of chaos, Rick finally revealed why Alan was in shock. Before him stood the face of his own father, whom he had considered lost. Entering that place surrounded by dragons and important people, all buried memories and emotions surged within me at once. Alan realized that everything around looked exactly like the past he was trying to forget, and at that moment the name seemed to linger, bringing back memories that still haunted him. While the warriors discussed the absurd invasion of monsters across the land, the tension inside the fortress only grew. No one understood why it happened, but everyone knew the defensive line was barely holding and was about to break through. While debates raged whether to survive at sea or conquer the lands of the continent, the leaders began to come into conflict with each other. Alan silently watched, and the fact that reinforcements were coming from nowhere made the situation even more desperate. Even amid the tension of war, Slod looked at Alan with pure contempt, calling him a loser right in front of everyone, but seeing Alan's silent gaze, Victor realized that something strange and heavy was approaching, and Slod continued to humiliate Alan in front of others, saying that he was good for nothing except attracting monsters. Even when some tried to defuse the situation, the man admitted that he hated his son and could not even bear to look him in the eyes. Alan suddenly realized that his own father was afraid of him. While everyone tried to hammer into his head what Slode wanted, Alan saw the truth. Beneath all his power and ambitions hid just a petty, frightened man. While Slode continued to behave arrogantly and provocatively, suddenly night fell. He rode up to the fortress on a horse and introduced himself as reinforcements sent by Alrana. The unexpected arrival made even the northern warriors suspicious and tense. The warrior sent by Alroni declared that the real trouble begins in the dungeon, which attracts monsters from all over the region, and with incredible confidence proclaimed himself a hero known throughout Alrone, claiming he had the strength to destroy the dungeon alone. Even when the hero tried to shake Alan with memories and the image of his father, he understood that nothing would make his sword waver. With a wild smile, Alan showed that the enemies were completely mistaken in thinking he was still chained to the past. When the hero finally understood Alan's past and everything that shaped his life, he saw where the true strength of that alchemist came from. It was not just power, but all the pain and experience that turned Alan into the man he became. With a confident and mad smile, Alan declared that right now he would prove an alchemist can defeat even a hero. Standing before Alan, the hero felt a strange but familiar unease slowly growing inside him. Even without understanding why, that presence reminded him of something deep and troubling that he had felt in the dungeon. As if Alan himself was connected to that darkness. Even when the hero tried to convince himself that it was just a dungeon illusion he could no longer deny, Alan was too real to simply ignore. The presence of that alchemist made his own perception of reality begin to crack and crumble even before the completely stunned hero felt it. Alan finally took off the mask. He was the master of that dungeon. Hearing this, the man froze in shock. In that face, he recognized a person he had considered lost long ago. When he looked at Alan, the hero finally saw the truth hidden behind that appearance. In complete shock, he exclaimed, "Rick Elrod," and realized that the dungeon master standing before him was a person from his past. Learning the truth, the hero, overwhelmed with rage, lunged at Alan, but he was instantly stopped. Calmly observing what was happening, Alan understood. The enemy seemed even stronger than before. The hero admitted that he had once expelled Alan because he considered him worthless and without a future, and now he was shocked to see how powerful he had become. Even when he tried to touch Alan with old memories, the alchemist remained unshaken. He was annoyed that he finally heard words he was never told when he was in the group. The hero sincerely believed, by showing Alan's painful past, he would break him. But in the end, he realized he was completely wrong. Alan, with a calm expression on his face, said that he also wanted to look into the hero's past, as if trying to understand who that man really was. Standing face to face with Alan at the top of the stairs, the hero heard an unexpected question: what was truly the heart of his existence? Only the mention of his core made the man instantly shudder, as if Alan had touched something extremely important and dangerous. When he realized that Alan seemed to see his true essence, the hero fell into despair. The alchemist's calm gaze awakened old feelings, and the man shouted in anger for Alan not to pretend to understand him just by looking into his eyes. Suddenly, the hero found himself in a completely different place. He was completely confused. He strained to understand what had happened. In the silence of that strange space, a figure suddenly appeared before him. It looked at him coldly, as if it had been waiting for his arrival. The hero suddenly realized that he had been brought to the first floor of the alchemist's dungeon right at the very spot immediately after the entrance. Even when he was given a chance to escape, he immediately refused and rushed forward, burning with rage and ready to face the alchemist face to face. Consumed by fury, Alan moved through the dungeon, swearing that he would tear the alchemist to pieces with his own hands. Meanwhile, the alchemist calmly watched, satisfied that he had finally created the perfect situation to make Alan listen to his words. Alan was rushing through the dungeon at a crazy speed, crossing corridors and traps without hesitation. Because this place was exactly like the one he had already explored, he was confident in his strength. He was convinced no vile trap, no cunning trick could stop him while he was hunting the alchemist. Running through the dungeon, Alan was constantly irritated by the alchemist's voice, which claimed he had finally made him listen to his words, and extremely annoyed, shouted for him to be silent, but the voice continued to echo endlessly through the corridors. Before the final confrontation, the alchemist froze in thought and realized victory over Alan alone would solve nothing. Even if he drove him out, new adventurers would still come, and having wasted all his strength on that battle, he would only destroy the great goal he sought to protect. The alchemist decided, no more monsters and no new traps in the dungeon. Instead, they went against Alan, relying only on what they already had. In fact, his goal was not to kill the hero, but to break his pride and finally make him understand the message he had been trying to convey from the very beginning. The alchemist confessed that he had prepared a teleportation spell using Alan's blood, allowing him to send his words directly into the hero's thoughts. Physically stopping him while his ability was active was unrealistic, so this was the only way to make him listen until the very end. While they waited for the inevitable confrontation, the alchemist finally asked why Alan hated him so much. Without hiding his anger, Alan admitted that he was always annoyed by that calm smile, and that this absurd irritation had long fueled his power. Consumed by rage, Alan accused the alchemist of mocking him and treating his past as some meaningless experiment, each word only intensifying his anger, and he swore to crush that annoying smile that had haunted him from the very beginning. Alan openly admitted that he truly hated the alchemist because he could not accept that someone so strong behaved so calmly and peacefully for him. Strength was always associated with anger and violence, so seeing a powerful person without hatred in their heart seemed absurd. And again, he accused the alchemist of mocking him and treating his past as some empty experiment. The alchemist struck Alan's soul with words that hurt more than any blow. He said that there was emptiness in him and that his entire life was held together only by the title of hero. According to him, Alan had pushed everyone around him so far away that it came to the point where without that title, there was nothing left in him at all. The alchemist's words deeply shook Alan when he said that all his self-esteem was built on pushing others away to feel superior. He explained that existing because of who you are and existing only because of what you are not may seem the same, but deep down they are completely different things. Disagreeing with those words, Alan stated that the title of hero was only a natural result of the power he had gained through his own abilities. Now that his power had returned, he was confident that no one would ever be able to take the hero title away from him. The alchemist listened carefully to Alan's response and suddenly understood. For him, being a hero was merely a direct consequence of the power he possessed. Realizing that all of Alan's confidence came only from that ability, he finally began to see the true root of the hero's obsession with power. With a calm smile, the alchemist posed a question that shook Alan even deeper. Wasn't the ability he valued so much born from the very power he always rejected? So if he rejects it, doesn't he also reject himself? While Alan remained in the dungeon, rumors about the hero began to spread throughout the city in newspapers and on every street. The people desperately demanded answers, while the kingdom only tried to quell the panic by claiming that Alan supposedly went by royal order to conquer the dungeon. The city was drowned in chaos and fear. Because of the rumors about the hero, even the nobles could no longer walk the streets safely. As the tension grew, a mysterious figure appeared before the royal family. Calmly thanked them for the generosity they showed at that critical moment. The king decided to shelter the hero's former comrade within the castle walls. He assured that he would not harm one who had served the kingdom so loyally. Even under protection, she felt uncomfortable, as if someone like her did not deserve such hospitality in times when chaos devours the kingdom. Even after getting a chance to leave the capital, she admitted, she no longer feels any place to which she could return. Recalling the hero's former group, she suddenly realized they were all lost. And without any direction, and this deeply troubled her, she worried about the fate of each of them. Walking through the stone corridors of the castle, the girl finally could not hold back and asked what true skill really was. At the same time, Alan admitted that the real reason for the breakup of their former group was that his power stopped working, and this completely shook everything that once held the team together. Alan exploded with rage upon hearing that his power was not something he had gained himself, but a power that had been lent to him all along. Overcome with pride, he shouted, asking who Rick thought he was to speak to him that way, and instead heard a cold, eerily calm response. Unfortunately, it was the truth. Rick then revealed the most absurd part of the whole truth: Alan's monstrous ability. He only woke up after drinking the golden elixir created by himself. That elixir, which Alan always considered an ordinary thing, in fact, was directly connected to the awakening of his power, and the hero felt for the first time, perhaps this might never truly have belonged to him alone. Even before Alan exploded with rage, Rick continued to study his ability like a true alchemist. He couldn't wrap his head around how an invincible force could exist without real limitations. When he observed the hero's absurd techniques, the perfect evasion that worked only with empty hands, and the deadly strike tied to the lunar cycle. Rick realized that the more powerful the skill, the more hidden conditions it had. Then Rick threw the last truth right in Alan's face. Space in the whole world, among the crowd of adventurers and alchemists, only he knew how to create golden potions that awakened that monstrous ability. If he hadn't met him in the past, the hero's power would never have awakened, and that meant that even that absurd power Alan admired so much. Maybe it all existed only because of him. Rick finally exposed Alan's true weakness: his arrogance. He said the hero lost because he never trusted anyone nearby. If he had formed real bonds with his comrades, instead of seeing them only as inferior to himself, maybe he himself would have uncovered the secret of his own mastery. Before everything collapsed, Alan, consumed by rage, tried to break through, and Rick's calm voice echoed down the corridor, calling him hero with pure irony. Every word cut deeper into Alan than any attack, and the man who always considered himself invincible began to hesitate. For the first time, standing before the truth, he did not want to accept it. At that very moment, Alan felt his mind begin to unravel, and a little girl rushed at him, shouting that this would be the end. And while the strike broke free, Rick revealed, there was a huge misunderstanding in alchemy. especially in monster synthesis, an ancient secret capable of completely changing everything. Alan believed he knew his power. During the brutal attack, Rick explained that for years people believed powerful monsters could never be created without extraordinarily strong base materials, but recent research proved that this theory was false. While Alan was crushed under a ridiculous series of blows, he began to understand that the entire logic of creating monsters, and perhaps even his own power, turned out to be completely mistaken. The little girl continued to press on Alan, not giving him a breath, while Rick revealed the most terrible discovery of all. Under extremely rare anomalous conditions, it was possible to create monsters of a much higher rank than expected. In other words, absurdly powerful beings could appear even without legendary materials. It was enough for certain anomalies to arise in the process. While Alan slowly found himself in a corner, Rick explained that all research on monster synthesis ultimately converges to one idea. Everything comes down to probability and the fortunate coincidence of necessary conditions. And then he directly linked this to skills and questioned what no one had ever dared to even imagine. Do those who use their powers really understand how they work, or do they simply accept their results without realizing the true hidden conditions that trigger these abilities? Rick realized with horror the most terrible hypothesis. These abilities are a blessing from some plane beyond human understanding, forces capable of shaking entire nations. And what if somewhere there existed someone who could freely control those ridiculously low probabilities hidden behind these skills? Then such a person would have power comparable to that of a true demon king. When Alan was thrown to another level of the dungeon, he came to his senses. The second surrounded by a forest created inside the fortress, confused. Regaining consciousness, he realized he had fallen to the third floor. Everything around him began to confirm one thing: this dungeon is far from a simple labyrinth. Meanwhile, on the third floor, Alan was trying to catch his breath. The little girl apologized for overdoing it and literally piercing him through the ground, but Rick did not look worried at all. On the contrary, finding himself cut off on that floor, Alan calmly said that now they have all the time in the world to talk before finally defeating him. Alan instantly realized that this was an absurd trap. Thorns and obstacles began to lock the forest around him. Rick mockingly said that the most famous hero of that era would not even think about escape. Then the girl revealed the real name of this cruel game tag, and at that moment Alan realized that he had become prey in his own dungeon. Running desperately through the forest, Alan felt a humiliation he had never imagined. The strongest hero in the world was running away like a hunted beast, while searching for a way out, he suddenly realized the girl completely controls the area, blocking paths and leading him every step. And then Alan remembered Tony's words about moss, which hinted at the direction. Alan realized that maybe there was still a way to break out of that living labyrinth. Running through the forest, Rick's words still echoed in his head. His arrogance and distrust of others were his greatest weakness. Irritated, he tried to ignore it until a giant shock shook the entire forest. As soon as Alan looked ahead, his face froze. He realized that something monstrous had appeared before him. The girl noticed something strange in the behavior of her little familiar, and in the next moment, the whole forest began to tremble fiercely. Rick doubts whether he should continue participating in missions, but Yuri reassures him helping can be done in different ways. Even without standing on the front line, he can, for example, strengthen the item supplies, inspired. Rick feels the true power of an alchemist lies in the ability to sense the needs of the moment and create a solution at exactly the right time. He is focused on disassembling various tools, such as the teleportation platform. And that little note about communication, seeing that it is useful not only in battle, it became clear its help in dungeon management and strategy is also important. Not noticing any adventurers nearby, Yuri asks her master if he is tired. He admits that he wants to sleep, and Yuri smiles and says that spirits like her do not need to sleep. Rick, dreaming of rest, thinks, will he be able to craft a pillow for himself? With dungeon glasses, although the situation is improvised, he says he can sleep even on the floor. The main thing is to have a pillow. Yuri, curious, just watches as he saves DP by deciding not to make the bed. Seeing that the master wants to sleep, Yuri unexpectedly offers him to lay his head on her lap. Rick is shocked and shyly blushes at such an offer. He says he feels awkward to accept, but Yuri insists. You can use any part of my body without hesitation, she says. She smiles invitingly at him, and he, without a word, completely confused and blushing from the situation. Rick, lying on Yuri's lap, is noticeably nervous but gradually relaxes. She asks how he is, and he, embarrassed and uncertain, weakly replies that everything is fine. To avoid embarrassment, he suggests making a real bed next time. Yuri gently encourages him to fall asleep calmly, but Rick lies there, anxious and restless. Even trying to relax, he cannot get rid of the burden of what happened. Remembering the traveler who died, Rick admits to himself, Watching him being killed, he felt no guilt. When Yuri notices that he has woken up, she tries to talk about yesterday, but Rick is still a hostage of his own dark thoughts. Rick realizes with horror that he felt nothing, although he was not the one who directly killed the adventurer. It seems to him that as a human he should at least have some reaction. But Yuri explains that this may be related to the contract he made with her, sealing this deal. Rick was bound not only to her, but also to the dungeon itself for the spirit of such a place. The death of intruders is simply a natural part of its cycle. Rick begins to question whether he is still human because when he kills, he feels nothing anymore, and Yuri hints that this may be a consequence of the contract made with her. She hugs him tightly and says that despite everything, he remains her master, the only one who can rule that dungeon. Rick, still trembling, slowly accepts this new role. Rick, now more confident in his place as dungeon master, embraces his new identity. At night, a lonely girl appears under the door, clutching her hat tightly, begging for help, and calling Rick with despair in her eyes. In front of the rank G dungeon appears a new group of adventurers led by Randall, Mort's a mid-level team, average rank B, and they peer intently at the entrance, intrigued by the secrets that this supposedly weak dungeon might hide. Standing before the dungeon entrance, the group members whispered their suspicions. Although it is only a rank G dungeon, since it was discovered a month ago, no one has been able to pass it. The internal structure and behavior of the monsters are still unknown, and even the most experienced researchers have not returned. Randall notes that all this looks like a classic trap for inattentive veterans, and confidently says that previous adventurers probably failed. Due to negligence and overconfidence, he believes that his group would know when to retreat even in critical situations. The team agrees they are confident, they are better and burn with pride. They decide to prove their worth by outdoing those who got carried away by temporary success. The group of adventurers was suddenly hit by a brutal attack. One of them was pierced through. Everyone froze in shock when high-level monsters appeared in the G-rank dungeon, something they considered impossible. One in despair recalled his mother's promise to become a respected adventurer, and now stands before death, overwhelmed by horror and regret. While one adventurer hopes for the future next to a pregnant woman, the monster cruelly crushes him, and chaos erupts around. Another is grabbed and killed in an instant. Scene turns into a bloody massacre. The group panics, screams, and desperately flees when they realize they are dealing with creatures much stronger than the level of this dungeon. One adventuress thinks about the future, dreams of retiring and living in peace, but her dream is interrupted by the gaze of a behemoth. Then she is brutally eaten, and this scene shocks one of her companions. Someone froze before the creature. Rick, observing from afar, recognized the monster with a gloomy tint. It was the same giant he had created. Rick understands that something is wrong with how they treat the invaders, seeing the escape as an adventure. He decides to let her go, saying that chasing and killing all the invaders ruins the dungeon's reputation. The dungeon needs visitors to bring points, but because everyone is being wiped out, adventurers start avoiding it, and he realizes, if this continues, no one will come anymore, and his goals will suffer. Rick explains his plan. By allowing the survivors to escape, they will spread rumors about the dungeon and attract more adventurers, especially rank B. Because they already know these opponents can be handled without problems. He wants to use this to increase the number of accumulated DP points. He admits that he does not want to be limited and strives to fully explore the dungeon's potential. The dungeon jumped to rank F, and the assistant, shining with joy over this progress, sincerely congratulated Rick, saying that working as a dungeon master is perfect for him. He was promoted for how he drove away adventurers, and, as it turned out, this benefited the development of that place. Rick learns in shock that the rank has risen to F, all because a full 10,000 DP accumulated. With the new classification, the creation catalog was updated. Now it is possible to create even more items, including alchemical tools, and he literally shone with excitement over these new possibilities. Rick understands well, by allowing adventurers to escape, he inevitably reveals part of the dungeon's power, and this attracts stronger opponents, so he decides the time has come to further strengthen his defense with everything at hand. He prepares to start a new synthesis of the monster, determined not to allow any negligence. On one of the lower floors of the SS rank dungeon, a brutal massacre broke out. A group of adventurers froze in shock upon seeing the bodies and the wild cruelty of the creatures. Alan, their leader, stands obviously worried and silent, nervously sweating. Even when others try to calm him, a heavy burden of responsibility presses on his shoulders for what they have seen. While part of the group begins to doubt the safety of the mission, one of them admits he is not as strong as Alan and is already thinking of quitting the research. Alan, on the other hand, cannot calm down for a moment. His skill raises stats depending on danger, but it did not work, so the place seems not to be that threatening. but he feels that something is wrong and cannot understand why his ability failed again. Tension in the group rises. Everyone feels increasing pressure due to the danger in the SS rank dungeon. Tension escalates. Everyone again recalls the moment when the heroes had to retreat in the middle of the mission. Some doubt whether the dungeon is really that dangerous, while others already show regret and anxiety. When everything around is so uncertain, suddenly an unexpected proposal appears. Victor suggests bringing Rick back to the group, confidently saying that he can be the missing link that will ensure the mission's success. The group discusses that Alan has changed. He has been acting strangely since the reshuffle in the team, and Mary suggests that this might be the cause of the problem. Victor believes, although Dorma moves slowly, her potions are still better than Rick's potions. He comes to the conclusion, the difference between alchemists hardly explains Alan's instability, so now he is looking for the real source of unrest in the group. The group admits that after Rick's departure everyone became unusually tense, especially Alan, and Mary confesses, although Dorma is skilled, talent alone does not solve everything. Rick's absence created a heavy atmosphere. Someone feels as if they are suffocating, others are constantly on alert. Gradually, everyone notices that Rick brought balance and comfort, something the new order cannot reproduce. The group begins to remember Rick warmly, although he was clumsy and truly obsessed with potions. He was always hardworking, smiling, and determined, even in the most difficult moments. His silent support saved the group more than once. He left so quietly that no one noticed, and over time everyone began to admit his departure was a mistake, even if Alan expelled him for unknown reasons. When the group recalls the past, doubt arises in the air. Will Alan be able to apologize to Rick? Although they wanted to settle everything, they realized the root of the problem is deeper in Alan's mental state, and he is forced to admit it. This can only worsen his condition. The conversation ended, and everyone became thoughtful, feeling the tension growing in the group. During the conversation, everyone frankly admits no one really knows how Alan's ability activates, and there are no clear answers. They decide that it is not the time to rush anything. The moment is too fragile, so they simply watch carefully and patiently wait for a better opportunity to intervene. The alchemist watches calmly. While she analyzes documents and conducts tests in the laboratory, she cannot shake the question, is the problem really just this, or is there something deeper hidden behind it? Confident that something crucial is missing, she drips a substance into a flask and restarts the experiment in search of that decisive detail. Rick looks at the three rank of monsters he created, a huge cyclops, a jelly-like creature named King Slime, and the mysterious arachne. Despite their high level, he understands the group lacks a decisive strike. This makes him seriously think he needs to further increase his combat power to truly protect the dungeon. Rick watches the three rank of monsters he created himself. Powerful Cyclops, the gelatinous King Slime, and the mysterious arachne. Even with such strength, he feels that something decisive is missing to protect the dungeon, so he resolutely sets about strengthening the arsenal and honing combat tactics. He knew, without his own power enhancing the creations, he would not hold control over this place. Rick wondered what would happen if he synthesized only rank of monsters. Curiosity would not let him rest. Until now, he had combined only lower-rank creatures. Excited and encouraged by his ally, he decides to try as soon as the creation limit is restored. But before they can act, an unexpected guest appears and disrupts their plans. Rick recognizes her with surprise. It is Mary, a former partner. He is stunned to see her there, and it instantly changes the entire atmosphere. What until now was limited to creating monsters suddenly takes a sharp turn. This unexpected meeting overturns the whole picture. Cheyenne recognizes Mary from afar, and without hesitation, rushes down the stairs to make sure as she approaches. Mary also recognized her and rushed to her, noticeably relieved. Cheyenne, concerned, anxiously asks, "Where are the other group members?" Cheyenne informs her that all of Mary's companions Randall, Letak, Evan, and Barrick have died. Mary is shocked. She does not believe it and repeats distrustfully, "They are dead." She recalls how the group set out to investigate a recently discovered dungeon near Al Raja, but their fate turned tragic. A month has passed since the discovery, and no one knew exactly what was inside. Mary tries to explain that her survival is not just luck. Others doubt it, and she says that the dungeon monsters behaved strangely, as if under someone's control and anticipating every move of the group. Despite the team's strength, all fell. Mary is convinced she survived because someone deliberately let her go, as if her life was spared for a reason. Mary recalls that it all started a month ago when the dungeon was opened. The monsters moved as if coordinated, as if someone controlled them, and she insists with a serious look it was not an ordinary labyrinth. Finally, she apologizes to Cheyenne, acknowledges the sharp pain of loss, and begs to accept this cruel reality. while the group is mesmerized watching the image of Mary in the magical artifact. One of the participants asks why she is here. One of those present recognizes her, the healer from their old group, interestedly asks what she is doing here, and says with surprise that her appearance here is clearly not accidental. In a lonely dungeon, Mary, gasping for breath, walks and calls Rick, believing he is here. She shouts. She whispered, "Show yourself if you see me." In the silence, something falls nearby, and she tenses even more. Determined, she demands that the presence reveal itself. Mary stumbles upon. Before her stands a formidable figure, a huge monster. Meanwhile, Rick watches from afar and says he wants to talk to her. The companion nearby considers his decision strange. The monster, on the other hand, aggressively lunges and firmly grabs Mary, destroying any possibility of a peaceful conversation. The monster retreats, leaving Mary on the ground. She is clearly shaken. Confused and trying to understand what happened, she looks around, asks where she is, and a mysterious figure watches intently with a secretive gaze. Finally, Rick appears before Mary. Next to him stands a winged figure. He calmly greets her, saying they haven't seen each other for a long time. Mary instantly recognizes him, on his face surprise, but in his eyes unwavering confidence. Understanding the truth, she says that it was his plan from the very beginning. Rick, stunned, replies, "You already knew." Mary explains that at the academy she studied the structure of dungeons and immediately realized the girl with Rick is a dungeon spirit. She puts all the facts together. The dungeon appeared right after Rick left the group, and only he could have thought to let the one who survived alive go. Rick tries to justify himself, saying he thought she escaped on her own, but Mary abruptly interrupts him, angrily telling him not to do stupid things. Mary directly addresses Rick, asking him to. Does he even understand what he is doing in this tension? She recalls the past. At the very moment when she was introduced to the group as the new healer. With a trembling voice, she politely introduced herself and promised to try her best, and Rick and the others accepted her warmly. This memory only intensifies the pain she feels seeing what he has become. Mary recalls the beginning in the group, when the comrades accepted her warmly and gladly. They said that her presence as a healer would be a great help, because before they barely managed to substitute for each other. Rick greeted her with a gentle smile and introduced himself as Rick Elrod. Mary Shea responded with a handshake, trying to look confident before the new team. The group moves deeper into the Rank B dungeon, convinced that on the next floor is the boss's room, and everyone is tense. And Rick suggests freezing until the monsters do not notice their presence. Meanwhile, he scolds Alan for reckless behavior, then orders Maria to prepare the golden elixir. To his surprise, she responds instantly and carries out the order, showing loyalty even under pressure. During the mission, the group realizes how important Maria is. One of the members notes that thanks to her, keeping the pace has become much easier. Meanwhile, Rick has become calmer. He no longer needs to think about healing, and Alan, on the other hand, grumbles at that idiot researcher who waits for instructions and even says that despite all this, they rely on Rick's potion to cope with stats and buffs. Mary hears these comments and, though her face is stern, agrees better to be useful than ignored. Mary shyly approaches Rick and asks if she can talk to him. She addresses him formally, and he smiles and asks to be called simply Rick. Worried, Mary asks if he is okay, saying that Alan and Victor are usually harsh with him. Rick downplays the situation, says it's normal and that he is fine, trying to calm her with a calm smile, and Mary openly opens up to Rick. She says she is afraid of hindering the group as a healer and does not know what to do. Rick, with a quiet smile, reassures her that it does not matter and she should not worry so much, because if she worries too much about him, she might make mistakes and put herself in danger. Moved by his words, Mary smiled and sincerely thanked him. She felt Rick's kindness, his care, truly touched her. Rick admits that what he really strives for is only to continue his research in comfort. He admits the more Mary works, the less he has to strain himself and the more time remains for learning. Although it sounds selfish, in the end he says he likes how everything is now. Meanwhile, Mary extends the ready golden potion. I take on yet another task for the group again. Looking back, Mary remembers that although she wanted to help Rick, in the end it was he who helped her. She feels it as a true act of kindness. Lowering her eyes and moved, she whispered to herself that this was exactly the Rick she knew, kind and always ready to help. But just as she wanted to continue, someone called her. This interrupted her thoughts. Rick claims that he has not changed and continues his research, even if creating powerful monsters is only a side effect. Angry Mary says she does not understand how he could stand against humanity. During their conversation, suspicion arises that the dungeon spirit influences Rick, uses his feelings, and controls his actions, especially pushing anger against Alan. The spirit itself denies everything with an ironic smile and says it harms no one. Rick sincerely says that he holds no grudge against Alan for kicking him out of the group. he understands that Alan needed space to grow in that. In a certain sense, it gave him a chance to find a place where he could finally show what he was really capable of, yet still. Yet still, Rick insists, if he has to oppose other ideals, he will fight with all his might even if it means fighting Alan himself. Mary, with tears in her eyes, admits that she still wants to bring Rick back, but he firmly replies that he does everything only for himself, not for Mary, Alan, or anyone else, and says that this is his true desire. Although he feels affection for her, Rick says he is not good enough to give her his place. And sadly smiling, apologizes. Rick calmly rests, while meanwhile the underground spirit calm. When he is told that making a girl cry is rude, he laughs cynically and says it is too late to care about that, especially after he has killed so many adventurers. His words clearly show that he has fully accepted the dark path he chose. Rick decisively says that now he is the master of the dungeons and will do everything to protect this place, surrounded by monsters that serve him. Mary, with tears in her eyes, silently watches and feels the weight of the chasm between the Rick she knew and the man he has become. Yuri observes the interaction between Rick and Mary. In her eyes, there is visible envy, though she tries to hide it. Rick, embarrassed by her behavior, asks if he did something wrong. Yuri waves it off, trying not to show discomfort, but it is clear he is irritated. Rick, not understanding the reason, only says that Mary was just a former teammate and that he doesn't even know what kind of relationship Yuri imagines. And Yuri replies that Mary must have been a close friend of Rick because she came to the dungeon looking for him specifically. Rick insists Mary was always kind to everyone. He is still not sure if it was something special. Then he suddenly changes the subject and says that his skill will work at the end of the day, but he needs help to prepare the creation of rank of monsters. The process is much more complicated. Rick understands that although some time ago he made a contract with the dungeon spirit, he still knows almost nothing about her. She, in turn, curiously asks about his past and about whom he was with before, and then, after a short silence, says that rushing during the contract signing is no reason not to get to know each other better. Soon she begins to philosophize about relationships. She says that this often happens. Couples are initially fascinated with each other, quickly marry, and then become disappointed in each other. Rick looks confused and does not understand where she got such an idea. The dungeon spirit, embarrassed, tries to justify her previous comment, saying that she and Rick are dependent on each other because they are in this together. Rick smiles and suggests, from now on, let's get to know each other better. They sincerely look into each other's eyes under the watchful gaze of the monsters and say that there is still plenty of time to strengthen this bond. Yuri hugs Rick tightly and admits that she was wrong. Her behavior was due to jealousy, and Rick gently assures her everything is fine. Meanwhile, the monsters around react as if nothing happened, as if they are already used to such drama. Rick decides to focus on the next step, synthesizing a rank of monster. At the same time, in another place, a fierce battle breaks out, and during the intense confrontation, one of the fighters desperately realizes that his skill is not working. He cannot understand whether he forgot some condition or something is wrong with his technique. But Alan Cole, confident and fierce, contemptuously interrupts the doubts, decisively calls himself a hero, and arrogantly challenges the opponent, ready to dominate the fight. Alan proudly recalls his glorious times. The king recognized him. He survived 9 deadly situations and never knew defeat. He says that he is not afraid of death, and it is this that brought him enlightenment. Watching others, he saw how many of them were so afraid of death that they could not even look it in the eye. In his mind, this placed him on a higher level, and he moved forward confidently and invincibly. During the confrontation, Alan exploded with rage, shouting that everyone around was worthless. His comrade tried to calm him down, but anger and frustration completely consumed him. In the midst of chaos, something flew and crashed into the ground with force. Victor seems to have barely escaped harm from Alan and asks if he really tried to kill him. Despite the tense atmosphere, Victor asked him to calm down. Yuri tries to break up the quarrel. Alan, still irritated, tells her to shut up, but when she reports that Mary has disappeared, it shocks Alan and the others, and to hide his concern, he orders everyone to forget about her. Although he says that she never disappeared without warning, Yuri still tries to justify why she is so important. But the rest of the group waved it off, saying there are other healers nearby, and meanwhile a mysterious man appears. With a sarcastic smile, he taunts, who would climb onto a sinking ship, as if saying that something is hidden behind all this and the group is declining. An irritated Alan asked what he wants. The man mockingly ridiculed Alan, hinting that in such a state he would be unable to lead or conquer the SSS-ranked dungeon, let alone create a new squad. Alan got angry, but the man continued, saying that even someone as strong as him can be easily replaced, and it was he who turned this mockery upside down. This shows that the same doubts and weaknesses affect Alan himself, the hero, who kneels before the royal throne, and contemplates what the title of hero means. It is given only to those adventurers who surpass all norms. Despite all these honors, he knows well, the king can replace him at any moment. Everything depends on the results. When an unexpected figure appeared before him, Alan was surprised to realize that he was in a fragile position. He was clearly made to understand that his reputation and status were hanging by a thread. Marie returned to the group after disappearing and explained that she got lost while gathering herbs, although the others had already warmly welcomed her. Alan stands coldly and says that she simply avoided the work of finding a replacement, giving no explanations. He decisively orders everyone to prepare for the next mission. Rick and Yuri continue preparing for the synthesis of rank A monsters, such as the Slime King and Arachne. Although the process is similar to synthesizing lower ranks, breaking down the materials is much harder. The procedure will take a long time, so Rick decides not to waste time and simultaneously expand the dungeon. Meanwhile, Yuri looks confident, certain that Cyclops will handle the necessary brute force. Yuri asks in surprise how Rick ended up in the hero group. He explains that it all started with a prophecy from a fortune teller who was passing through his village. The woman said that if he went to Alan Cole, he would have a chance to write his name in history. Although, honestly, believing this might have seemed foolish, Rick still followed the advice and it changed his life. Rick reflects on his path and admits, maybe it all started with an empty prophecy, but the desire to change his life and become an alchemist pushed him to act. He recalls that. But back then Alan was proud, though not as arrogant as now, and you are surprised that Alan accepted him into the group, even though he appeared out of nowhere. Walking through the S-rank dungeon, Rick thought that maybe Alan continued to develop even after mastering his skills. During the mission, everything went awry. The group found themselves in a critical situation because the members noticed Alan's abilities were not activating, and the lack of coordination among them became glaringly obvious. Tension rises when someone says the only way out is to retreat. Stubborn Alan refuses and explodes with aggression, ignoring the warnings of his comrades, and the atmosphere instantly sours, showing that the team is far from united. The group heatedly discusses their condition and whether they will have to face the dungeon master, and one of them sincerely says that he will not survive in that situation. Alan reacted with contempt, accusing the others of cowardice and lack of determination. Tension explodes as Fitz tries to warn them about the risks and recklessness of moving forward. In the heat of the conflict, a creature sneaks out of the shadows, and Fitz, acting on impulse, rushes alone towards danger, ignoring the rest of the group. Fitz goes alone against the monster, but he is immediately attacked. The enemy delivers fast, brutal blows. The group watches in shock as Fitz falls seriously wounded. Deep wounds open on him. The creature lunged into attack, and the blow momentarily paralyzed everyone. The sudden brutality caught them by surprise. Something unusual begins in the very center of the field. A strange reaction emits strange sounds and strong jolts, and everyone stands confused and frightened. Rick and the dungeon spirit watch intently, not understanding where this phenomenon came from. Meanwhile, Marion and Fitz are also stunned. Amid the chaos, another warrior teases Fitz, hinting that now he has a reason to leave the group, and Alan is silent. It is clear that he is worried. Alan looks at the wounded Fitz with contempt and says he will replace him as soon as they leave, because Fitz is no longer a warrior or a member of their group. Even when a comrade warns him, Alan insists no one can replace the leg that Fitz lost, and the tension rises. The ground slightly cracked underfoot, and Alan decided that Fitz's physical and emotional weakness was to blame. Supposedly, he will never be able to keep up with the group. Mysterious woman emerges from the water. Her threatening presence shocks Rick and his companion. Meanwhile, Alan, full of rage and contempt, shouts that he does not want incompetent people like Rick and his group. A sudden slap on the water tears the scene. This is how a new character dramatically appears. Just appeared, the girl looks around, confused and not understanding where she ended up, and suddenly a barely noticeable mysterious smile plays on her lips. Meanwhile, Rick's companion looks at her in surprise, then goes into shock when she notices another mysterious woman. She appeared in their nest and further complicated the situation. The new synthesized girl appeared completely shameless. Rick, confused and not knowing how to react, froze at her perfectly human appearance, although he knew she was born a monster through synthesis. Rick tries to justify himself after being reprimanded for looking at the girl, while the newly synthesized girl magically dresses herself easily and amazes everyone. Her ease and ability to dress herself only deepen doubts about her true nature. Rick, impressed, begins to ask himself who she really is. He introduces himself as Rick Elrod and admits that he is the alchemist who created this girl. Embarrassed by the revelation, she doubts her existence and begins to wonder who she really is. No one could fully understand where she came from and why. The girl plunges into a deep existential crisis, begins to doubt her origin, her purpose, and even the very existence of the world around her. She does not understand why she ended up there, where her consciousness came from, and who she really is. Rick Watch was stunned to realize there is something completely unusual about her, and Yuri added that monsters in dungeons usually do not have their own self or consciousness, so this girl's case is a complete exception. The girl desperately challenges Rick. She persistently demands an answer why she exists, calling him the creator, even God, because she is sure only he can give meaning to her life. Under pressure, Rick froze speechless. He cannot give a clear explanation. The tension rises, even Yuri is called to answer, and the confusion about who this new being is and why she is here only grows. Yuri proudly and easily replies that she lives only to serve Rick, calls him her master, and says that together with him she helped create the dungeon. The new girl listens silently and watches attentively, hiding her emotions. Finally, she presses her palm to her chest, thinking over the answer, and the group watches her reaction, waiting to see if it satisfies her. After a small dispute, the newly created girl, irritated for no apparent reason, finally pulls on Yuri's clothes, causing an embarrassing scene. Yuri quickly rushes to cover herself and anxiously asks if Rick noticed anything. Sweaty and nervous, he looks away from her and denies it, trying to get out of this situation as quickly as possible. Jealous Yuri jumps into an argument with Rick, hinting that he was eagerly awaiting their first night together. The conversation instantly turns into chaos, and Yuri even threatens to undress to prove her point. Meanwhile, the newly created girl watches everything coldly and directly. This reminds that she does not even know who she is and where she ended up. The tension between comedy and existential drama creates a palpable contrast between the characters. The year begins to tell about its past, recalling that it was once just an ordinary, aimless alchemist stand. Everything changed when it found itself in that place. There he met Yuri and synthesized monsters, and together they created a dungeon. It was in the process that he finally understood where his place in the world was and what he was truly capable of. Rick extends his hand to the newly created girl, smiles warmly, and assures her that in time she will understand who she really is, but for now she can consider the dungeon her home. He introduces himself again and proudly declares that he is the ruler of this place, and the girl, still confused, barely touches his hand, accepting Rick's gesture and beginning her new journey alongside them. The newly created girl, decides to call Rick Dad, saying this is the least she can do out of respect since he created her. Then she looks at Yuri and asks if she can also call her mother, because she helped in the process. This causes surprise and confusion. Yuri feels awkward, and Rick does not know how to react. While the girl stubbornly insists that she is simply fair, acknowledging both as her creators. The new girl, who now treated Rick and Yuri as parents. She asks what her name is, requesting something worthy and appropriate, and Yuri, delighted by the thought that they could become a family, praises his daughter for her understanding. Rick, surprised and a little embarrassed, admits that he already had a name for her. Rick decides to name the newly created girl Cruz. He explained that he was inspired by the homunculus from ancient alchemical literature. Yuri praised his choice, saying it was kind of him. Cruz thoughtfully repeated that name, reflecting that the true goal of alchemy is to uncover the secrets of life and challenge the dominion of the gods. While Rick was explaining the meaning of the name Cruz, the girl suddenly interrupted him. Something strange appeared in the magic sphere. The image instantly caught everyone's attention, and Cruz Sirius couldn't hold back. Do they really not care about what is being shown? The scene suddenly shows a hand being cut off, bound in chains, a harsh sign that danger is already near. Alan suddenly remembered what he had seen before falling. A colossal golem was destroying parts of the fortress, and at that moment, he understood how bad everything was. If it continued like this, the entire third floor could collapse, and he wouldn't even have time to get out of the dungeon. Falling to the ground, completely consumed by disappointment, Alan began to break down emotionally. Screaming in rage, he refused to accept everything Rick said. He called the weak, worthless creatures who survive only by clinging to the strong. For Alan, admitting that his strength depended on someone else meant destroying the entire identity he had built as a hero. Alan desperately shouted that he had reached this point on his own and rejected this cruel truth. For him, admitting that his strength depended on others would mean destroying everything he considered himself to be. Looking from afar, Rick felt that Alan was deeply suffering, because for a person, a broken self is almost unbearable pain. Having completely shattered Alan's pride, Rick reached his final conclusion, without any emotion in his voice. He ordered Kreutz to finish off the hero, saying there was nothing more to learn from him. The girl coldly accepted the order, and Alan, for the first time in his life, felt that he was facing a person who truly and completely understood his existence. Even destroyed in body and soul to the last crumb, Alan still refused to fall. In a last desperate surge, he rushed at Kreutz, giving all the strength he had left. But the girl effortlessly shattered every attack. She repeatedly brushed off the hero, as if simply playing with him, and then again throwing Alan away. Hua looked at the man before her so miserable and threw a cold, almost disappointed remark. Despite all the arrogance, cruelty, and obsession that consumed Alan, deep in his heart he was once a true hero. Alan looked at his defeat and could not accept reality, even fallen and broken. He stubbornly insisted that everything was not so, because the power to reject reality should have made him invincible. Overcome with despair, Alan decided to reject reality itself again. Shouting that he would deny everything, he unleashed his power to the fullest. He created a terrible explosion that shook the entire surrounding forest. After the furious explosion of power, Alan finally managed to awaken his skill. Watching in shock as the hero restored his true power, Tony finally understood why Alan's mastery had returned. The golden potion brought by the monsters did not let the hero's spirit die forever. And that is why his power did not fade, it remained active even after he regained his skill. Alan again stubbornly rejected reality. But Kreutz simply calmly looked at him. He said that no matter how many times he tried, the result would always be the same. Tony felt that something was wrong. Unlike before, Kreutz moved straight toward Alan. The hero, again wrapped in the power of his skill, standing before her, felt a strange fear creeping up. The explosion of power threw the Kreutz into the sky. Alan released absurd pressure around his body. Seeing this, Tony realized with horror that the hero was no longer who he used to be, but something completely different. Alan completely lost his head and rushed at Kreutz like a mad beast. Even when the monstrous power of the hero pressed on him, the girl previously just perceived it as a crazy display of power. Suddenly, a huge abyss opened beneath him and threw him into the void. Even trapped in the abyss, Alan kept moving forward like a mad beast. Realizing that ordinary attacks would not work, he decided to resort to his skill. Even more cruelly, forcibly draining all the blood from Kreutz. Realizing what Alan was planning, Tony shouted to Kreutz in panic, "Run." But it was already too late. The hero's skill forcibly began to grasp the girl's body. Kreutz desperately tried to understand why Tony interrupted her, and Tony finally realized the truth. Alan's whole life was based on constantly refusing others, and now, having turned into that senseless monster, the hero completely lost himself. Tony understood that Alan had completely gone mad. He could not accept the bitter truth. He gained his power through others. The hero now rejected everything around him, becoming nothing but poison consumed by his own obsession. Tony compared Alan to poison that accumulates over the years. Like toxins slowly spreading until they kill the body, Alan devoured his obsessions all his life. Rejections and distorted ideals broke him, and in the end, he became the poison itself. Even consumed by monstrous power, Tony felt that Alan was still unstable. The Kreutz did not retreat and continued fighting him, and Tony shouted to her not to let her guard down. For Tony, all that senseless power turned out to be just a mask created by the emptiness inside Alan, and he completely gave up fighting Kroa. Overwhelmed by his own power, he decided to ignore everything and focus entirely on destroying the fortress and ascending to the next floor, clearly indicating that now no one could stop him. Alan broke through the fortress like an unstoppable monster, destroying everything in his path. Moving forward, consumed by poisonous power, the dungeon monsters began reacting to his appearance, as if recognizing him as the new undisputed lord. The entire dungeon turned into a battlefield. Alan was now completely consumed by his own power. He advanced alongside the monsters, destroying everyone who appeared in his way, sowing absolute chaos everywhere. Alan effortlessly crushed enemies, with a terrifying smile on his lips, and his body was filled with monstrous energy. Even Kroa realized that he was becoming something completely out of control. Alan's energy finally exploded fully, and surrounded by monsters and consumed by that mad aura, he began ravaging everything around, simply unleashing raw power. Even Tony and the others were shocked to what absurd level he had reached. Alan appeared before Tony in his final monstrous form. Without any emotion, he declared that he had won. At that very moment, Tony realized the former hero had effectively ceased to exist. As soon as Alan lost faith in himself, his power began to crumble. Then Kroa revealed the truth. His ability existed only because Alan had spent his whole life asserting only his ideals and rejecting everything around him. Tony explained that Alan's power repelled everything that did not fit into his ideal 7, his own weaknesses. But when he learned that his power came from another person, Alan renounced even himself, burning his own power to ashes until he reached the limit. Alan resisted until the very end, refusing to admit defeat, and Tony coldly said that it was all over. Consumed by his ruined power, Alan realized too late this terrible world was the consequence of his own choices. Tony, standing next to Alan, began to recall the past. While they, as if casually, chatted about potions and missions, he suddenly realized that Alan had already been relying heavily on his creations, without even noticing especially on those special elixirs he had been working on for years. Tony admitted that he had no hesitation in abandoning his research every time someone outpaced him and found a better solution. Alan became irritated when he understood. It was absurd to him that someone would simply abandon years of effort and remain indifferent. Tony said that alchemy exists to help all humanity, not to feed someone's pride or fuel rivalry. Alan despised such a way of thinking. He believed that strength without one's own victory has no value at all. Even in defeat, Alan heard Rick admit that perhaps his idealistic view was actually correct. While Alan was disappearing into the abyss, Rick and the monsters loudly and joyfully celebrated the dungeon's victory. After the battle, Rick and the others celebrated, tightly hugging Yui, who could not hold back emotions because of the victory. But the happiness lasted only a moment. They noticed something strange. Even after the victory over Alan, the dungeon stubbornly did not recognize his death and gave no DP. And at that moment, they realized the worst. Alan simply vanished before their eyes. Rick understood that Alan was actually not dead. His ability probably sent his body to another dimension. Yet he was so excited that he shouted that when Alan returns, he will defeat him again and continue to study his power. Yui just smiled, understanding that Rick never changes. After the battle, they realized that no one had escaped from the dungeon, and all who were inside simply vanished without leaving a single trace. And others saw in this a true tragedy. Alan simply understood, this is a sign that the future Demon King will become even more dangerous. The priestess decided to leave the life of an adventurer and return to her homeland. Although she was respected as a former healer of the hero squad, she said that title no longer meant anything. Seeing Rick and Alan, she suddenly understood something important about the world and about herself. She said it as if opening eyes. A person's true self is shown by their actions, which they believe in, not by the name or title given to them. If someone lives trapped in a role that does not correspond to their true essence, sooner or later, the burden of that identity will crush them. Ultimately, what matters is not who you become, but what you manage to accomplish. Yuri declared that Rick will one day become the Demon King even before anyone officially gives him that title. According to her, he has already crossed that boundary without even noticing, and suddenly an ancient terrible dragon appeared, an SS-rank creature that could rival Crow herself. Rick realizes that the invaders managed to defeat a rank monster, and he is stunned by how quickly rumors about this place have spread. Meanwhile, Yuri reports the enemies are advancing through a newly created section of the dungeon. There are still collapses and traps that haven't yet been set in place. Faced with the situation, Rick decides to call for backup from another district and rushes to find a means of communication to act as quickly as possible. Cruz asks Rick if she should kill the invader people, and this cold proposal shocked both him and Yuri. Assessing the situation, she quickly counts the enemies and decides, if it's only them she can handle it alone, decisively rushing toward the group of enemies, confident in her strength. Rick and Yuri stood watching as the teams departed, anxiously wondering if she would manage on her own. Meanwhile, the enemies underestimate her childlike appearance, but one of them warns don't be fooled. Cruz instantly bursts into battle with speed and precision, stunning the opponents from the very first move. With one precise strike, Cruz easily knocks out one of the enemies, and the rest freeze in shock. They barely react, stunned by her unexpected strength. With a cold, confident gaze, she looks at the opponents and sarcastically says that they are more fragile than she imagined. In a luxurious hall, two aristocrats discuss the hero, reproaching him for a lack of loyalty, while someone disdainfully bites into an apple. Another notes that just this month, the group has already failed 7 times trying to conquer the dungeon. This causes irritation and concern, and clearly shows that the hero's reputation is falling. The nobles continue to hotly discuss the hero's fate. One of them suggests giving him money because they are worried about the Senate's pressure and the threat that other states will take advantage of this weakness. Despite the criticism, they still acknowledge the hero's past achievements. In the end, they decided to give him one last chance to prove what he is truly capable of. New dungeon, rapidly expanding, attracted attention near the very capital. It almost destroyed an unprepared group of adventurers. Rumors say that the monsters there are much stronger than the indicated dungeon level, so a possible fight with them is considered the best test to find out what the hero is really worth. The dungeon trembled, a sign that something dangerous is about to begin. Meanwhile, a revelation emerges. Newly created girl turns out to be the true progenitor of vampires, a creature born a vampire, not transformed. Her power ranked SS, much higher than usual, and now it remains to find out whether the hero can prove his worth against an enemy of such caliber, or if the dungeon will only show how truly threatening he is. Rick froze in shock when he realized the true power level of the newly created SS-ranked girl. He and Yuri come to the conclusion, with someone like her nearby, they will finally be able to compete with the hero, and the girl, smiling with a sharp and proud look, says that everything is decided and calls Rick daddy. The group gains new hope and a sense of an inevitable turning point. Kruz demonstrates her stunning strength with an indifferent expression. She easily deals with several enemies. Her movements are lightning fast, precise, and ruthless in a matter of seconds. Everyone falls unconscious, and Rick, watching from afar, smiles, impressed by the result, and understands. The most powerful weapon they could create is now on their side. Now the group enjoyed a cozy, well-equipped base. Points accumulated quickly, and constant support from the teams made this place truly ideal for living. Inspecting the rooms, the hero happily noticed new conveniences. Especially with those tools he never thought he would have access to. When he was in Alan's old group here, he saw a new beginning, full of resources and opportunities. The main hero became worried because the level of invaders was increasing. He admitted that he used part of the dungeon's resources for his projects, but only the surplus. The elf hinted that when crews are present, dealing with enemies would be easy, but this only intensified his unease. Relying too much on her could prove risky. Although Kruz's strength was so incredible that even heroes would find it hard to oppose her, he hesitated because he understood that risks still existed. Kruz glowed with excitement and pride, saying that since birth she had easily repelled various invaders. He assured her that he never forced her into anything, emphasizing that she always took on the tasks herself. Kruz, full of confidence, said that all the enemies were like child's play and expressed a desire to have more serious opponents in the future. Despite the light mood, the elf remained thoughtful. She began to doubt whether she was overdramatizing her worries. A new character appeared, Albert Rito. He entered excitedly, introduced himself energetically, and with a smile said that it was a great honor for him that Alan had called him personally. It was said that Albert was a star among the attackers in Marco's group, or at least that's what people said. Meanwhile, a formidable, threatening figure loomed over them. Suspicions grew that something serious might happen at any moment. The elf tried to stay calm, but was clearly worried due to the unusual delay, while Albert pretended to be confident and enthusiastic, whereas the rest of the group looked skeptical and contemptuous. Some wondered how long he would last, hinting that he was brought in because of some profitable deal. One of them mocked their current performance, and this caused tense reactions. Albert tried to do everything easily and casually, saying he would bring new energy to the team, but the tension increased when one of the members lost patience because of his speech. A strict and straightforward atmosphere raged in the group. Alan clearly made it understood that actions mattered more than words here, and everyone had to prove their worth in practice. It was announced that the next morning they would face a new dungeon, and everyone had to be at the peak of their strength. The group remained cold. There was no place for jokes here. The environment was harsh and did not tolerate weakness. The group received an alarming message about a new invasion in the dungeon, and the main hero noted that the attacks had become more frequent, but he himself remained calm. The crew was glowing with excitement and readiness to act, confidently accepting the mission. Meanwhile, the elf watched from afar, using magic to track the movements of the invaders. Although she convinced herself that everything was under control, something in their route made her waver and awakened a slight distrust as the group of invaders moved through the dungeon. Strange, abnormal silence alerted the entire group. One of them warned that traps might be scattered around, and everyone became on guard. While surveying the area, someone asked for a golden elixir, showing caution. Although the traps seemed easy to understand, the situation still demanded attentiveness. They realized, because of their presence, there were fewer monsters and more traps, as the dungeon had its own history and required constant attention. Kruz intercepted the invaders with a sadistic smile and absolute confidence. Quickly assessing the group of enemies without hesitation, launched a brutal attack and easily knocked down one. With a mad gleam in her eyes, she warned that she would have some fun first and then finish off everyone, making it clear she was not just defending the dungeon, she wanted to enjoy the fight. During the clash, one of the invaders took advantage of a vulnerable moment and threw a potion toward the crew. The vial exploded with a dazzling flash, momentarily blinding everyone around. The elf and Kruz jumped back in surprise from the sudden glow. Annoyed by the trick, Kruz exploded with rage, clearly making it known that she would not retreat so easily. Gaius, meanwhile, the tension of the battle rapidly increased. The invaders' attack continued with a series of coordinated strikes. One of them suddenly raised a wall of earth, hitting the crews and throwing one of her allies far away, and the crews were irritated by these interruptions. She tried to counterattack, but fell into an unexpected move that trapped her underground, and everything instantly got out of control. The enemy's strength turned out to be much more dangerous than expected. But even wounded and obviously shaken, the crews decided not to retreat and continued to fight. As she prepared, she was suddenly caught by a trap with flying creatures. A cloud of smoke exploded and blurred her vision, while the invaders looked on in confusion, not understanding whether she was fleeing or deliberately attacking. Cruz, with tears in her eyes, admitted that she could see nothing, and one enemy thought she was deliberately falling into traps. Everyone was shocked to see that her advance was stopped. She was not overcome by the invaders, but caught by the scattered dungeon traps, and meanwhile the hostile group realized. Despite her strength, she was vulnerable at that moment and decided to rush forward. The dungeon master grew increasingly nervous. He feared that the enemies would bypass the teams and break into the room where they were. And the situation was getting worse and worse. The hero noticed that the dungeon had been expanded, traps were set, and simple passages laid out to buy time, but he realized that this would not be enough. In the darkness and silence, he pondered his excessive dependence on the teams. Suddenly he realized he had forgotten the most important thing, a safe escape route. Tension gripped them. Footsteps were getting closer, and they had almost no time left. The invaders discovered with horror that the crews had been affected by the blindness trap. Taking advantage of the moment, they confidently moved forward, convinced that from such a distance she would not notice them. The group stayed together. They were preparing for the next move when a powerful roar echoed down the corridor. Something huge was about to break free, and as the creature approached, the tension only grew. Mighty Dungeon Cyclops was released against the invaders, and one ally sincerely believed he could handle it, but the dungeon master. Finally, they realized they had underestimated the enemies, and he firmly warned. Leaving the Cyclops alone against the entire group was reckless. Soon the Cyclops rushed into battle, but he was instantly surrounded, and altogether attacked. He quickly fell under the pressure. While the thunder of destruction echoed throughout the place, the Cyclops fiercely resisted. But the invaders were prepared. Someone noticed that the creature was tougher than expected, yet the group remained calm. They remembered the effect of the golden mixture, which gave them a powerful surge of strength. Confident, they coordinated a decisive attack, which ended with a devastating explosion that hit the Cyclops directly. Combined forces began to tilt the battle in favor of the invaders. The Cyclops fell with a crash, broken, severely wounded, and too weak to fight further. Despite the injuries, the enemy squad confirmed that everyone was okay. The leader admitted the fight was tough, but all endured. Clearing the way, they prepared to move deeper into the dungeon. While the defenders silently froze, shocked by the giantess's fall. Although she was still blind, her commands returned to the fight and surprised the invaders with her endurance. They believed they still had the advantage and noticed a chance to attack her while her sight had not yet returned. One enemy rushed forward but underestimated Cruz. The next moment, a strong attack caused an explosion, stunning everyone and stopping the group's advance. Cruz, still blind, began to sniff the air around. She muttered that the smell was unpleasant but familiar. The invader. The invaders looked confused until they realized too late what she was doing. Following the Cyclops' blood trail, the teams were able to track her opponents, and this discovery shocked the group, especially Marco. He understood that she was definitely controlling her attacks. Relying only on her sense of smell, Cruz moved precisely and quickly, guided solely by the scent of blood. Her strike was precise and instantly felled one attacker. The rest of the group froze. They realized too late that she did not need to see to be deadly dangerous. Marco, with an irritated, surprised expression, realized that they had completely underestimated the girl. The girl became resolute and relentless, even while in a disadvantageous position. After a fierce battle, the crews looked at the wounded but still alive Cyclops and recognized how resilient he was. She sincerely thanked him for saving her during the battle. The elf noticed with relief that the Cyclops was fine. Cruz admitted that she had underestimated the creature and acknowledged its value. For a moment, everything calmed down. Mutual respect arose among the dungeon defenders. After the clash, the dungeon master admitted his mistakes. He trusted his comrades' abilities too much and did not listen to his own judgment. "You are." Yuri calmed him, gently reminding him that relying on the strength of others is perfectly normal, especially when he bore responsibility for everyone there. Moved by the trust shown to him, he decided that he must use his own strength not only to save himself, but also to protect everyone with him. Albert desperately raced through the dungeon corridors. Shocked by the insane decision of one of the group members, he panicked. And he realized that the man, enraged with fury, had rushed alone at a group of Cacatris S-rank monsters. Was breathless. Even a novice would never dare such a reckless act. The danger was immense, and the situation seemed completely out of control. Albert rushed through the corridors, calling the missing comrades, completely confused and heard no response. He found himself in a ring of huge and menacing creatures. Frightened and alone, he realized the danger around him too late, and despair gripped him when he understood he had fallen right into their ambush. Alan told the group that he saw the cockatrices heading in the same direction as Albert. Rideout panicked, but in a moment realized that it was just a distraction, and someone from the group suggested ignoring Albert and moving on while he kept the monsters occupied. The suggestion to leave him shocked Rado. He reacted instantly, not believing that they seriously wanted to leave him behind. Mathilda clenched in pain and began to rise, instantly throwing the group into panic. Not understanding what was happening, they rushed to examine her. One of them recognized these symptoms. She inhaled cockatrice poison. The situation was serious. If nothing was done, Mathilda would die in 6 hours. The tension grew even more now the group was in a desperate race against time to save her. The group discussed the seriousness of the situation. Toxicity level S, it was impossible to create an antidote from the available resources, and even Mary's healing magic would not be strong enough. Frustration was growing, and one of the members hardened. Alan was harshly criticized, saying that his haste and actions had led them into this situation. Despite the tension, no one dared to directly oppose him, and this clearly showed that there was no clear leader among the survivors. The group argued, trying to understand how they ended up in this mess. Someone bitterly regretted that Rick and Fitz were not nearby. They could have helped or prevented Alan from acting impulsively. Alredo blamed himself, trying to understand where everything went wrong. Mary suggested the most urgent thing to take Mathilda to the city before the poison killed her. The tension was incredible, but the main thing was to save the companion. Tension rose when Mary spoke out against the decision to move on and not help Albert. She shouted that this was not the time to argue about who was in charge, because someone's life was at risk. Even amid the tension, she recalled Dorma's words and appealed to a stranger's conscience. Her determination and irritation were obvious. This made Rido react. He agreed with a serious expression they could no longer waste time. After the discussion, Rido took everything under his control and asked everyone to retreat for now. Although reluctantly, Alan agreed, sensing the seriousness of the request. Mary sincerely thanked Victor for his help, and he calmly responded, showing his dedication to the group. Having made the decision, Rado ordered Victor to carry Matilda, and everyone prepared to set off. Since it was extremely urgent, they postponed disputes and focused on saving their comrade. Despite continuous, desperate attempts with potions and healing magic, Matilda did not survive the poison. After 2 days and 3 nights, her life faded. Even when the antidote was found, it was already too late. When Alan returned, he asked about her condition, but the answer was direct and painful. She did not survive. The news hit him instantly, and a heavy silence hung in the air. Matilda's death broke Mary's heart. She could no longer endure what was happening. She declared that she could not stay in that group. Memories of Rick's loss and Fitz's disappearance, because of her, were too painful. It was all too much. Victor tried to comfort her, but Alan remained aloof and walked away without reacting. In tears, Mary shouted, "Alan, do you still have a heart?" Because she could not understand his icy indifference amid such pain. Filled with disappointment, Alan bitterly regretted that he could not save Matilda, but admitted that he was already looking for a replacement for the group. Overflowing with rage over refusals and disrespect from other adventurers, he began to doubt whether his reputation had been devalued. His thoughts returned to Mary. He was offended that she, whom he considered merely a healer, dared to challenge him, and each time he recalled her defiance, his anger only grew and fueled his resentment. Seized by rage, Alan exploded when he felt that everyone around underestimated him. In a fit of anger, he broke something nearby and rushed through the streets. On the way, he encountered a mysterious man, accompanied by a dark figure. Alan challenged him. But the man remained calm and introduced himself as Alfred Blythe, though impatience and aggression were felt in him. Alan, unwilling to talk, told him to step back. Tension hung between them. Despite Alan's open hostility, Alfred remained calm. He said he came with a letter from the king himself. This news stunned Alan, and he immediately changed his attitude. Stunned, he repeated in a low, distrustful voice, "The king," and the atmosphere instantly changed. Tension gave way to unexpected curiosity and seriousness. Alan loudly read the letter from the king, despite everyone acknowledging his past merits. It was clear from this, his recent failures in conquering dungeons had already crossed the threshold of tolerance. The letter said that the Senate was going to officially strip him of the hero title. Alan, hearing this, froze in shock and was overwhelmed with indignation. Despite the threat of losing the title, Alan learned there was still a chance for redemption. If he conquered several dungeons, he could retain his status. Surprised by the apparent simplicity of the proposal, he soon realized it concealed a condition. The first proposed target turned out to be the very dungeon that recently attracted attention, the same one where he was previously defeated. Tension envelops the group again, and Mary reacts with anxiety. The dungeon lord, still undecided about the next creatures, admits he is focused on creating powerful monsters, but is already beginning to look for more effective ways to manage this place. Having an expanded catalog of options, the burden of decisions weighs on him, and he decides to turn to Yuri for advice. She is experienced and prudent. She is surprised but listens attentively. Yuri was touched that he entrusted him with such an important responsibility. She promises to help in every way she can and proudly feels useful to the master. He thanks her with a smile. Shoulder to shoulder, they decide to inspect the current state of the dungeon. Thus begins a new stage of changes and improvements. While analyzing the dungeon's structure, Yuri came up with several improvements and suggested dividing it into floors to make exploration more challenging. Complicating the defense and giving monsters buffs for each floor, the master, recalling his own initial naivety, accepts these ideas and begins to reconfigure the system, and the conversation increasingly delves into technical details, clearly showing how important planning and strategy are for defending this place. The dungeon floor becomes a forest. To the master's surprise, Yuri explains that this is part of the field change. It allows placing stronger monsters in their natural environment and complicates the invaders' advance, and the new terrain also facilitates the defense of the next floor. The conversation ended with a check of point expenditure, and it clearly shows that the available resources are sufficient. Yuri says that the dungeon counted 25,000 DP from defeated adventurers, and it jumped to rank E. The master is impressed to see that the total sum has already reached 36,200 DP. Even after significant expenses on changing the field and expansion, she says that from rank E it will be possible to build structures that automatically generate DP, and this excited the group even more. Meanwhile, the master and Yuri discuss improving the dungeon. The newly created girl observes and decides she will also make her contribution, even without understanding alchemy or management. She decides to focus on what she knows: training. Inspired, she leads a small group of monsters, determined to make them stronger. The master encourages them with a smile and only asks not to overexert themselves. The main character thinks with a smile that challenging himself from alchemy to dungeon management exactly suits his nature. He remembers the seer from his hometown, who saw talent and fire in his heart and encouraged him. Look for a certain man with whom you can do something great. Now far from Alan and walking his own path, he wonders, will he also manage to do something important by the end of this journey? Alan still believes in his strength and refuses to admit that he might lose the hero title. He insists that he is still capable. Meanwhile, Albert is eager to intervene in the conversation and declares that the future of the nation must be entrusted to him, and Alfred insists that this is not just about Alan, it is a matter that directly affects the country's course. Despite everything, Alan firmly insists that there is only one way and makes it clear: no interference, even if politely asked. Alan froze in surprise. A man in a hood appeared before him, praising his steadfastness, but emphasizing that flexibility is extremely important in youth. When he showed his face, the man remembered Rick, that young man whom Alan sent, and directly asked where he was. He clearly became wary, noticing that there was not a word about him in the news. Alan recognizes the man in the hood and is amazed he is still alive. The guest sarcastically makes a remark about Alan's aged appearance, while he himself still looks deathly pale and eerie. Mary, embarrassed, asks who that man is, and Victor realizes that she is seeing him for the first time. The appearance of that stranger begins to arouse suspicion in the group. Turns out Albert Grace is a mysterious alchemist and royal advisor who has served at the court since the time of the current king's grandfather. Despite his title, he often travels to remote lands in search of promising young adventurers, as if it were his hobby. He appears at precisely those decisive moments for the nation. Intrigued, Mary asks why Alan detained Rick and his group, even though they did not get along, and Victor explains that besides the lack of people who would support him then, there were other reasons for the choice and hints that Albert might have influenced this decision. Rick joined the group only because Albert Grace directly recommended him. Even Alan considered him useless. He was left in the team only to preserve Albert's reputation. He was so respected that no one dared to contradict him, and although some say these are just rumors, the way everything unfolded clearly shows. Alan was forced to accept Rick under political pressure. In the end, even Albert himself seems not to remember the boy's name properly. Alan explodes with frustration right in front of Albert. He clearly makes it known that he has already expelled Rick from the group. He says that although he supported him for a long time, the boy never showed anything useful, and Victor and the others agree Rick has no notable achievements. Alan sharply criticized the idea of potential. They had no time to wait for something that might never happen, and for him, keeping Rick in the group was simply a useless burden. Albert calmly replied, laughing at Alan's impatience. He admits he has a habit of investing too much time and his own potential into work, but says that for alchemists this is normal. They live by careful observation and constant analysis. Finally, he says in a firm voice that patience is needed in everything and leaves Alan without arguments. Suddenly a warrior appears and attacks, reproaching Alan for his hasty decisions. Alan recognizes him stunned. Albert calmly observes the situation, knows that recklessness is a common trait of adventurers, but still sharply criticizes Alan's impulsiveness. Albert sharply criticizes Alan's attitude, saying that as a hero he must be able to distinguish courage from recklessness. Meanwhile, Rick is fiddling with alchemy in the laboratory. Yuri approaches interested, and Rick explains that he is creating something not in the catalog, but he obtained the materials himself during work. When the group was pondering the last push in conquering the dungeon, they realized that supplies and strength were already at the limit. Rick asked the question what would they do in that situation. Yuri hesitated, and Rick concluded that, although difficult, the best is to retreat. He insists that the adventure is only worth it when everyone is alive, although he knows not everyone thinks so. Rick feels the bitter truth of expeditions. If they retreat, the dungeon may change beyond recognition, and all gathered information will become useless. And he also remembers Vangyurm Shimon Vangyurm and the adventurers of Murma are by no means allies. During rest, sabotage and quarrels are common. Another group may claim credit for the conquest, and the decision turns out to be much more complicated than it seems. Rick admits that travelers often have to move on, even when making dangerous bets. Yuri is scared because of the possible consequences. RMRRJ. Remembering the risk of irreparable injuries, they could lose comrades even in case of victory. Rick then reveals his ace up his sleeve, a decisive ally who can turn the tide of the game. Rick shows the golden potion, the very one used by adventurers who previously invaded the dungeon. Yuri instantly recognizes it and doubts his intentions, while Rick, with a mysterious smile, makes it clear that he has a clear plan. A secret hangs in the air. Close. Rick decides to use the golden potion to heal the Cyclops. Then he asks Cruz to take this seriously at least once. The girl hesitated for a moment, but intrigued by Rick's proposed experiment, she agreed. Cruz accepts the offer without hesitation and even warns that in the heat of battle she might kill the Cyclops, and Rick, completely unfazed, challenges her. The Cyclops will fight under the influence of the golden potion, which will harm him, and Cruz doubts that it will really help. But she still prepares for the confrontation, saying that she is only following her father's orders. Yuri watches anxiously, unsure if it will really work. The Cyclops hesitates, nervously sweating. Cruz confidently says she will end everything quickly and without pain. Rick smiles and asks Yuri to take a closer look. Now, he will show what the golden potion is capable of. Cruz confidently launches an attack, but as soon as she strikes the Cyclops, something unexpected happened. Instead of an easy victory, she was stunned by abnormal strength. The Cyclops, enhanced by the golden elixir, barely reacted to the blow. Cruz feels something strange in her body, while the Cyclops stands frightened and does not understand what just happened. Even healed by the golden elixir, he begins to feel exhaustion, and Cruz fast and ruthless presses with precise strikes, keeping the enemy under control. She notices that despite regeneration, the monster's body is already failing from fatigue. Taking advantage of this, Cruz uses her endurance advantage to shake the balance of the fight and test the limits of the potion's power. Cruz rises, preparing to finish the Cyclops with the final blow. Yuri's heart tightens with fear that he might die, but the master gently calms her and asks her to watch carefully. The Cyclops, even in a disadvantageous position, meets the end with a firm posture. Cruz, confident in himself, rushed forward to deliver the decisive blow, ending the fight cold-bloodedly and in full control. At the very moment Cruz tries to finish the Cyclops, something completely unexpected happens. The monster, which should have been exhausted, responds with brutal strength and stunning speed, exchanging blows with her on equal terms. Cruz was amazed when she realized that the Cyclops repeats her movements, even after drinking the potion, a fight that seemed decided. The scene turns into an even, tense confrontation. Cruz is irritated by the interference, but the master strictly orders her and the Cyclops to stop. He notices the experiment succeeded. The goal was not to win the fight, but to test the potion's effect. Although Cruz was dissatisfied, he still tries to continue, but reassures her that even this result is quite enough. The Cyclops is still standing. It is clear he is exhausted, but calmly accepted the end of the fight. The master explains that he wanted to see how the Cyclops would perform against a clearly stronger opponent, like Cruz. He explains that the golden elixir reacts to crisis, temporarily enhancing all the abilities of the one who takes it. Although it is expensive and difficult to make, the effect is stunning. Since its invention, the survival chances of adventurers have jumped by 40 in short. This is a potion that saves and turns the tide of battle in the most critical moments. The master decides to supply all the dungeon monsters with the golden elixir. He explains that, although adventurers defeat monsters thanks to strategy and teamwork, numerical superiority and advantageous terrain already give monsters a big advantage, and if they also gain high resilience, even the most coordinated groups will be in trouble. The experiment with the Cyclops showed, even mid-level and higher adventurers will barely be able to advance. The hero concludes that his dungeon with strategic use of golden elixirs and flexible combinations of powers could only have been created by an alchemist with a wide range of skills, and to emphasize this identity, he suggests the name Alchemist's Dungeon, which surprises Yuri. It turns out this place didn't even have a name. After Albert quietly nudged him in the right direction, Alan agrees to join the new expedition into the dungeon. The old man so inflated his pride that he believed the decision was his own. Now, as the team gathered for the next push, he was ordered to cooperate with the new members, although he still suspects everything around him. Alan meets new members of his team. The first is Christopher Perez, a Ranka mage who flatters excessively and speaks exaggeratedly. The second is Aaron Seeger, also a Ranka healing mage, but much more restrained and straightforward. Both are here to back up the next dungeon mission. But Alan's cold reception already clearly showed the tension between them when the last member of his new team introduced himself. Tony Richards, the one who already knows Alan, and in him reads a mix of admiration and irritation, finally on a mission together, but his seriousness and bluntness hide disappointment due to Alan's coldness and detachment, and the new team is assembled, yet the lack of harmony among members already hints at future conflicts. Tony verbally attacks Alan, fervently asserting that a hero must be a symbol of hope and victory. And now Alan, accepting help, has become a disgrace to that ideal. He recalls the day he once lost to Alan, but does not hide his irritation seeing that now he depends on others. He bitterly said that Alan is falling. Meanwhile, someone approaches and breaks the growing tension. Tony steps forward, confidently holding a sword, and calls himself a candidate for an S-rank hero, proudly swearing to take on the burden of a hero, but Alan, irritated by his tone, immediately cuts in that a person limited by rank S has no right to judge him. Tension rises between them, turning into palpable rivalry, and Alan is clearly impatient because of this meeting. The old advisor interrupts. One more person must join the group. Tony says that this person should appear any moment now. The scene shifts a few hours back, as if something important is about to be revealed, and the appearance of this new figure might change the course of the conversation. While Yuri and the master anxiously peer into the observation sphere, they suddenly notice an uninvited guest has appeared in the dungeon. But what impresses the most is the speed itself, so insane that even the magical tracking system can't keep up. The figure rushes forward, destroying everything in its path, easily breaking guard monsters, and it becomes clear. This is not an ordinary invader. The invader finally reveals his face, a young man named Lyce Clement, an assassin of rank A. Although he has a childlike face, his confidence and posture reveal an experienced killer, and he looks at the dungeon with contempt, as if it is too simple for his level. The master, seeing him, froze in surprise. He never expected such a young person to be so dangerous. The host stood in shock, watching as his monsters proved completely powerless against Lyce's lightning speed. Even with numerical superiority, none of them could stop him. Lyce dances among the enemies easily, as if playing, laughing amid the chaos. His strength and agility are on a completely different level, so it becomes clear that usual tactics won't work against him. Lyce effortlessly advances forward, as if dancing, precisely dodging all attacks, and the monsters react. Their strikes don't even reach him. The master stands and watches, unable to comprehend how someone can completely ignore counterattacks. The enemy is not just fast, he seems to read every move of ours with absurd precision. The character calmly observes the monsters and realizes they are not nearly as impressive as expected. Assessing the situation, he decided he had seen enough and temporarily leaves this place. The character suddenly decides to flee, jumps out the window, and leaves the others behind. Meanwhile, one of the men admits that opposing him is suicide because he himself could easily be defeated, and the girl nearby reacts indignantly. But he only smiles, accepting his limitation. Observing the enemies, the group noticed that they avoided direct combat, but at the same time flawlessly responded to all our moves. The conclusion was simple: they must have some special ability. Someone says that even if everyone goes out onto the field, the chances of victory will be uncertain. The girl emphasizes this. The greatest loss turned out to be that they revealed their secret card. Instead, the invader makes it clear that his real goal was not the attack, but gathering information. The group decides, if such skilled adventurers start attacking more often, They will have to completely redesign the entire dungeon structure, considering this. They prepare intensely to review the plans from the very beginning. The group gathers around a table on which a map of the recent dungeon is spread out. Although they did not reach the deepest level, everyone shares what they managed to inspect. Therefore, one of them enthusiastically praises the efforts, while another doubts and asks why they were recognized earlier. The leader replies that there are several reasons, but falls silent for a moment before telling about the main one. The girl explains that although there are stronger dungeons, this one is the most difficult to comprehend, and she compares it to an evolutionary phase because more developed dungeons follow predictable patterns. But those that are still growing are full of mistakes and surprises, so it is harder to make a plan with them, as if fighting someone unpredictable who does not play by the usual rules. The group notes that the dungeon resembles a place for experiments. There are many victims and rumors are spreading. The leader notices that the dungeon master has a unique approach, as if playing a game. He predicts that as soon as a real invasion is attempted, the enemy will figure out their intentions and rebuild the entire structure again, so the current reconnaissance will only serve as a reference. The group now knows for sure this mission is no joke. The goal was simple: to obtain information. Attention was focused not only on the dungeon's plan. They rely not only on the external structure, but also on understanding the master's character, because, having studied his habits and whims, they believe they can predict his actions even when the structure is constantly changing. One of the participants wants the group to decide for themselves when to enter the dungeon. Another says they still need more reconnaissance, and Shemai Jijimi Seishis for now prioritizes more complex dungeons. Although understanding the essence, the first clearly lets it be known he does not want to remain on the sidelines of decision-making. He agreed to the investigation but strictly warned, if they continue to act from the shadows, now they will have to ask his permission. The hero decisively reminds his comrade that even if temporarily, he is the leader of the group. And to receive the royal order, annoyed, he demands more respect and caution in decision-making. Another takes the warning and promises not to forget it. Soon everyone gathers, someone gives a signal, the next stage begins, and they are ready to move forward. The elder gives the start to the meeting about the first dungeon conquest. One of the participants asks to discuss the plan more calmly, and everyone immediately adopts confident, determined facial expressions. Meanwhile, the emotional and silent girl seems to feel relief due to the unity of the group. The girl, sighing boredly, complains that there is no movement of adventurers in the dungeon at all. Meanwhile, everyone whispers that the person responsible for this has been locked in their room for 3 days without explanation, although food is brought as usual. Other residents grow increasingly anxious, while the man remains focused and plans the dungeon. Adjusting traps, the girl can no longer endure the boredom. Angrily, she shouts that she will go crazy if nothing is done. She firmly decides to pull her father out of the room, and despite warnings not to disturb him, she walks persistently, ready to force him out. Bursting into the room, the girl sees her father unconscious on the table. Around him are vials, plates, and papers. In panic, she screams thinking he is dead-end. Immediately, a commotion arises around. The man slowly wakes up and asks where he is. The girl breathes out with relief and rushes to him, overwhelmed with emotions. One of them suddenly pounced on him from above, completely catching him by surprise, had just woken up. The girls strictly reproach the man 3 days without rest, and he survives only on homemade potions. Worried, they remind him that he is still human, and if he doesn't eat, he might die. They warn him that if he falls, everything around will collapse too. In the end, they sincerely ask him to take better care of himself. One of the girls reminds the man that it's time to donate blood for her, and he admits that he forgot. Another, outraged, exclaimed that it is absurd to take blood from a person who is undernourished, and everyone agreed he needs to eat properly first. And while they argued about the quality of human blood, the tired man asked himself, do they really care about him, or are they just using him as a source of nourishment? The girls decide to cook food to help the master recover, and they throw themselves into the task with a sparkle in their eyes. He sincerely thanks them and, trusting them, promises to rest until then. But as soon as he is alone, doubts creep in whether they really know how to cook, and he becomes thoughtful, worried about the outcome. Deciding to help the master, the woman gathers various ingredients. She calls the real team of monsters to the kitchen and confidently says that with such help, something good will definitely come out. Outside, however, the daughter immediately asks what exactly they will cook. She implies that there may be enthusiasm, but no plan. Deciding what to cook, the girl suddenly realizes she has never really thought about what people eat. Suddenly, she remembered an old conversation with her father when he compared alchemy to cooking. For him, mixing several ingredients to create something completely new was almost alchemy, and the daughter, impressed, realized that perhaps he also knew little about food. Suddenly, an idea flashed through the girl. If cooking is like alchemy, then they can use her father's devices to prepare food. Excitedly, she says that with the right tools and a few adjustments, they will definitely be able to create something. The other silently watches, surprised by the bold proposal. Excitedly, she agrees with the idea and says that it makes sense. If potions affect the human body, then food, which also nourishes, can be prepared the same way she suggests that alchemy for the kitchen should work. Even if no one there really knows how to use alchemy, she decides, if it is not poisonous, it is worth trying. Not fully understanding what she is doing, the girl calmly gives simple instructions: cut the ingredients, mix, and cook. She's so confident that she urges everyone to simply copy what they see, thinking that this will be enough, and with energy and enthusiasm, throws herself into this chaotic kitchen bustle. Together with the monsters, while the dish is still cooking, one of the girls notices that if this continues, their father's stomach will not hold out until the food is ready. Remembering that real cooking takes half a day on a slow fire, they decide to speed up the process with a very unusual plan. Wyverns call it will release a powerful higher-level fire and accelerate everything around in a few minutes. The wyvern releases a furious burst of flame. They put it directly into the giant cauldron. The girls watch with excitement, confident that the hellish heat will speed up the cooking. But suddenly their faces are covered with shock and despair when they see what is happening in the pot. The contents of the cauldron completely evaporated after the fierce fire. One of the girls says she added a potion of resilience, but the steam made her feel strange. While they try to fix the mess, one of the monsters suddenly suggests adding salt because he sincerely believes it is useful, and the question remains, will it be coarse salt? But the biggest among them ignored the warnings and poured everything in at once, completely overdoing it. Although the dish looks decent, the real problem is its taste. One of the girls asks the goblin to taste it. He hesitates, chews carefully, but soon he spits everything out with a face of pure horror, and the girls' reaction shows. They were already expecting some kind of disaster. The finale, a complete catastrophe. The monster, having tasted the dish, fell unconscious to the floor. But the girl still insists on starting over, saying that alchemy is constant trial and error, and the cycle continues again. Even more explosive experiments and chaos in the kitchen, and the assistants are in despair, complaining that after so many explosive food experiments, they will soon run out of test subjects. After all that chaos and explosions, only fragments and exhausted bodies remained, yet the man still sincerely smiles and thanks them for their efforts. He felt the feelings hidden behind all this, and that impressed him the most, and both, moved, also smile, glad to have shown their devotion, even though they stand before the chaos left by the attempt to cook. The man with a humble smile only asked them to clean up all the mess. Two girls, upset and embarrassed, silently get to work, ready to deal with the consequences of alchemical cooking. Suddenly, the group comes across a table laden with the most diverse dishes. The cook explained that he prepared a dish where the main thing is taste and texture, because Yuri, as a spirit, does not need to eat. For his teammates, he chose grilled meat dishes, and as a sign of attention, added some of his own blood collected earlier. The main character admits that he once cooked at parties hosted by Alan, and noticed the similarity between alchemy and cooking. He decided to bring everyone together at one table because he remembered, despite all differences, there are comrades who fight side by side. The table fills with various creatures, and they all enjoy the food and the moment of unity. The group begins to sort out the situation, and what worries them most is the influential group that recently sent an assassin. Although they hindered the advance to the deepest levels, the enemies still learned important information about the monsters and their positions, for now. They do not have enough resources to completely replace the creatures on the front line while they enjoy their meal. The character confidently states that they will easily deal with the invaders. But they are given a warning: the enemy may split, one part will hold back our crews, and the other will rush into the very depths. If that happens, defeat will be inevitable. The main hero insists, we must prepare for stronger enemies, relying only on Cruz's brute force may not be enough. The group frantically discusses how to act in case of an attack. The dungeon is expanding, and the team is already struggling to cope alone. One idea is to expand the dungeon even more. During exploration, exhaust the enemies, and let the monsters finish them off. But hasty expansion is just a waste of resources, because against such strong enemies, it will hardly help. The group unanimously decides the dungeon's defense lacks a true tank. A monster wall that physically blocks the enemy's path and holds several at once. It does not need a strong attack. Endurance is important to avoid falling. The idea is simple. Place this creature in front of the deepest level so it can hold back the invaders while the team destroys them all at once. The hero remembered his first weapon and decided the next step is fusion, a necessary part of his strategy. Soon a formidable monster appeared, and loudly declared its loyalty to the dungeon. This was the signal. A new phase of the defense plan begins. A group of adventurers effortlessly breaks through a rank A dungeon, radiating confidence and arrogance, and one of them boasts that he could handle it alone. Someone remarks ironically that Tony hasn't even had to draw his sword since they entered. The team clearly does not see this place as a real threat. The adventurers laugh. The task was too easy, they were sent only as reinforcements, and one even says he didn't have time to draw his sword, which clearly showed the difference in levels. And yet they call this strategy a kind of insurance. One of the most analytical members decides to watch everything closely, and the leader warns, don't disrupt their rhythm. After the mission, the travelers gather again. One praises the group's work, while, in other mentions in search of information, he turned to the Thieves' Guild. World in the capital, it is considered the best source of intelligence. Although the tone is provocative, the atmosphere is relaxed, but there is a feeling that something important has just been revealed behind the scenes. The group tense discusses data from the Thieves' Guild. It turned out that valuable testimony was given by adventurers who survived the dungeon. Although everyone is worried about the idea of using royal funds from dubious sources, the informant assures that he paid not with money, but with expensive items. Hearing this, the rest agreed and raised no further objections. An elderly man appeared calmly settled among the company, and this upset the others. He insists that he has already finished the work and is now just there to pass the time, while the woman says with contempt that he is only an annoying obstacle and should return to the palace. The old man indifferently replies that he does not care whether others obey the royal orders, showing complete detachment and confidence. The old man says that his only wish is to watch the hero of the new era rise. In response, they provoke him. Just watch silently until you become a senile old man. Calmly smiling, he accepts the provocation with good humor and makes it clear that he will continue to simply observe. Tension hung in the air, tense but restrained, and the gazes were attentive and silent. The main hero performs fusion again this time, using a rank a monster as the base. Although this time he uses fewer creatures, he bets on quality rather than quantity and silently watches the process. He had no idea whether this new creature would bring happiness or trouble. Tension rises as the ritual continues. From the burning cauldron emerges a colossal creature dragon. Its appearance instantly stuns and paralyses the observers, while one of the adventurers barely reacts to the spectacle. Stunned to realize that this is a real dragon, a threat of a completely different level, born as a result of the fusion. A group of adventurers gathered to discuss what to do next. They agreed as soon as they passed the next dungeon, an even more serious challenge will await them. The conversation showed that previous expeditions taught them to better understand each other's abilities and cover weaknesses. Someone confidently confirms that they have already gathered enough information to move forward safely. He clearly makes it known. He does not want imposed company, he only asks that no one stands in his way. One of the comrades says that even with such a cold demeanor, it is right to meet the hero's wishes so that he can reveal his full potential. And although he is cold, others still recognize this approach as the most effective for the whole group. During the group discussion, one participant says that his role is not to lead Alan, but not to stand in his way. He admits that people are truly captivated not by the hero's personality, but by his stunning power, a might that conquers all. But this is not the same as the ability to lead others. For the group, this makes Alan the ideal warrior, but by no means a leader. During the conversation, Mary is questioned about the real reason she joined the group, but before she can answer, she is urgently called away in the middle of the battle. When the fight intensifies, a wounded comrade screams for treatment. Her voice breaks the moment of reflection and pushes back into the immediacy of the battle. During the fight, Victor is seriously wounded. He begins to lose consciousness. Mary rushed to help but was delayed and thereby attracted the attention of the warrior with the eye patch. Someone coldly reprimands her. Mary quickly apologizes, and another ally also reproaches her for her facial expression. Showing impatience at her hesitation, someone coldly reminds Mary that she can be replaced at any moment. She tries to explain that she came as a healer, but awkwardly falters and apologizes. The warrior with the eye patch sarcastically mocks her question, saying that only novices ask that, and emphasizes that Mary has been here for a long time but still doubts her place. Finally, Mary revealed the real reason for her appearance in the group. She is here to support someone. She talks about a mysterious man. Outwardly, he seems unfathomable, but she watches him closely. She knows that he is not good at speaking and is not a natural leader, but still wants to be near and support him. One character thoughtfully speaks about the devotion the group feels toward the hero, calling it true faith, and the warrior with the eye patch confirms this. She is ready for anything for him to be recognized as a true hero. She says that everyone in the group feels the same. Mary Leeds and Chris are also ready for anything for this common goal. In a secluded alley, an exchange of information is taking place. The informant hands over a scroll with the necessary data, and in response hears a sincere thank you. He notes the requester's eccentric tastes, hinting that there is something off about his preferences. From afar, Maria looks at the scene, stunned by what she just saw. The informant confessed he was watching the alchemist who was expelled from Alan's group, even though he was not hiding. He disappeared last seen near the entrance to the forest on the outskirts of the capital, in the very place where a new entrance to the dungeon appeared. According to the informant, the alchemist was probably gathering materials, but since then no one has heard from him, and Mary listens in shock, trying to understand the connection between these events. The informant says that at the very moment the alchemist disappeared, the nearby forest began to do strange things. Primal animals suddenly came to life and seemed to transform into magical creatures, and it seems even spirits are involved here. Looking intently at Mary, he directly asks her, hinting that she is hiding something. He says that her passivity sharply contrasts with Alan's good intentions. Mary remains stunned and speechless. Mary walks alone and sadly thinks to herself. She believes that she is nothing special, just a bit of talent and healing magic, enough to get noticed. She seized the chance to join the group of heroes and agreed, but as Alan said, there are many healers like her here. A deep sense of inferiority and emptiness was written on her face and in her thoughts. Mary recalls her earlier thoughts, believed that if she got a chance, she could become a truly important person. But now she painfully understands. The person she wanted to support has gone too far away. She does not want power that hurts others, and feels the burden of the consequences of unresolved decisions pressing on him. The mysterious figure emphasizes that a choice without firmness hurts not only the one who makes it brings suffering to everyone around. Mary, bowing her head, says she can no longer stay in the grouped room, falls silent. Others look at her in surprise, and someone calls her by name, understanding that the decision has already been made. Mary, with a sad smile, quietly says farewell, and in her voice one can hear restrained but unwavering pain. Mary looms over Alan, demanding that he explain his reaction. Alan stands up, irritated, but his comrades restrain him, begging him to calm down and listen. The warrior with an eye patch decisively interrupts him and orders him to simply listen at least once. Mary, with a trembling voice, confesses that she can no longer continue, and everyone froze in silence. Mary openly tells everyone, with her abilities she feels that she will only hinder the group, which she bows her head filled with uncertainty, but soon reveals her true feelings. All this time she tried her best because she wanted to be useful to the hero, and her voice trembled between sadness and disappointment, while Alan silently watched, surprised by her sincerity and with tears in his eyes. With tears in her eyes, Mary resolutely says that Alan is not a hero. These words shocked the entire group, and everyone froze in astonishment, confusion, and silence. Alan tries to respond, but her words cut him off mid-sentence, and tension fills the room because Mary finally faces the truth she long hid inside herself. After the sharp accusation from Mary, Alan sits silently, gloomy, his face hidden in shadow. With intertwined fingers and a firmly maintained posture, he simply says, "Continue," and his voice is a threatening calm that clearly shows he is ready to hear everything, even if it is painful. The tension in the hall thickens, and everyone holds their breath. Mary bursts into tears and rage, recalling how Rika, the one who was loyal to the group, was expelled without any hesitation. She realizes that she should have noticed the signs then, and accuses Alan of never thinking about his actions, always shifting the blame onto others when something goes against him. Her trembling voice reveals that his attitude ruined Fitz and even led to Matilda's death, and her words shock everyone in the room, exposing the weight of decisions once ignored. Mary, full of pain and anger, throws direct and harsh words into Alan's eyes, accusing him of having ignored everything he avoided for so long. She says that the group no longer expects anything from him, so no one opposes him anymore. Even when Victor interrupts her, she insists. She says that calling him a hero is a cruel joke. Her screams echo through the room, and Alan remains silent with a dark, motionless gaze. Victor, filled with outrage, loudly shouts at Alan, "You have no right to call yourself a hero." The accusation echoes through the hall, filled with outrage and truth. Meanwhile, Alan sits motionless, his eyes hidden in shadow, and his silence weighs more than any answer as the tension reaches its peak. Mary, gasping and with tears in her eyes, demands an answer from Alan. Finally, he spoke. But instead of reflecting, he began to mock, accusing Mary of only sowing distrust and ruining the group's mood with her childish complaints. In a cold tone, he says that her attitude offends the hero who acts under the king's orders. Mary, shocked, begins to realize the seriousness of his words. Alan hides his cruelty under a false sense of duty. With a crooked smile, he accuses Mary of rebellion against the kingdom. Having declared this, he called her a traitor, stated that she must be eliminated, and without hesitation lunged at her. Shock prevailed in the room. Victor shouted at Alan to stop, but it was already too late. The threat of murder is obvious. Alan's hero mask completely falls off, revealing the true nature of his power. Overcome with rage, Alan tries to forcibly impose his heroic authority. But he is immediately restrained by another group member who took away the weapon and directly pointed out that he is abusing power. Victor restrains Mary so she does not do anything rash, trying himself to calm the situation, but she explodes with anger and shouts that Alan is a coward because he never looks his flaws in the eye. Tension in the air, everyone is on edge. The group begins to notice that Alan's leader mask no longer commands the respect he demanded. The tension breaks when a royal envoy appears and authoritatively intervenes. He firmly says that Mary's words are not treason against the kingdom and give Alan no reason to attack her. The envoy acknowledges that Mary wants to leave the group and says that no one objects. Considering it an internal matter of the team, he decisively orders Alan to lower his sword and he announces that for now he will take Mary under his care and issues a direct warning. If this escalates into violence, the group itself will be condemned for failing to fulfill the role expected of them as heroes, and the royal envoy will make the final decision. No one dares to interfere with Mary until the current mission is completed. After that, they can do whatever they want. He asked everyone to come to an agreement, and Mary apologized she wanted to end the conflict. Alan remained silent, and the tension gradually subsided. The envoy laughs and tries to ease the tension, saying that something too unpleasant was shown. Mary bows gratefully, and the others try to recover and move on after the conflict. When the tension eased, the group members began to reflect, and someone realized that misunderstandings are inevitable with heavy state duties. Victor tries to lighten the situation, acknowledging Alan's outburst of losing patience. But he clearly makes it known that he went too far. He calls him by name, trying to restore the conversation in a more reasonable and restrained tone. Alan sharply changes the subject and reminds Victor of the main goal to conquer the dungeon as a symbol of the kingdom, brushing off what happened. He says in a cold voice that anyone who stains their honor must be destroyed, although Victor tries to remain calm. Alan smiles sinisterly and provocatively, noticing that Victor is still thinking about Mary. Mary, trembling and with tears in her eyes, whispered Rick's name with tenderness and regret, while Alan continued to smile a sadistic smile, clearly pleased with what was happening. Rick, on the other hand, seems surprised and touched when he hears Mary's call. Rick addresses Yuri through a magical communication paper, and she enthusiastically replies that everything works flawlessly. Yuri reports that the dungeon they were building has finally had its finishing touches done, and with constant supervision over the first 2 levels, everything is under control. The first level of the dungeon is a labyrinth full of traps. There are few monsters here because the goal is to confuse the invaders and make them make mistakes. The labyrinth is cleverly designed to slow down the enemy and simultaneously study their behavior. Depending on the situation, monsters or other obstacles were sent through portals, and all this is preparation for even fiercer battles on the next levels. The second level of the dungeon is a forest full of stones. Although there are fewer permanent traps here, low visibility makes it ideal for ambushes and guerrilla tactics. The entire field is made to generate waves of attacks to confuse and exhaust the invaders. Plants and monsters are arranged to catch them by surprise. The entrance to the deepest layer of Gragemere is guarded by skeletons who use the terrain and natural shelters for ambushes, and so far no one has managed to pass this section. The deepest level of the dungeon is the Dragon's Lair. After surviving the enemies on the previous layers, the invaders are met by a powerful newly synthesized fire. Dragon around it is unbearable heat, and a sea of flames ready to incinerate anyone who dares to enter. The presence of the dragon makes this place an almost impregnable fortress. Yuri calls it the perfect love nest for herself and her lord, which at the same time serves as the last line of defense of the dungeon. Monsters of one level are not always effective in battle, so the master, armed with alchemy and his own skills, selects only the most suitable ones for the dungeon. All chosen monsters receive golden elixirs that make their presence and power even more tangible. Ordinary synthesis is extremely difficult, and gathering even a few powerful monsters with good skills is almost impossible, so the true strength of the master lies in his special ability. This allows for effective and strategic combination of everything, and the boy enthusiastically surveys this place. He was struck that his skills were used in a completely different way than expected, but when asked if he was nervous, he only said he was calm. Next to him, a woman feels the same excitement and impatiently waits to see how the fruits of his labor will bloom. Suddenly, the silence is broken by someone's scream. Someone is calling for their father, and this immediately draws their attention. The girl rages with helplessness. She cannot go to the front line. She is torn by anger and a sense of futility. The boy reminds her that her role is vital, to guard the deepest point. He insists that this task could be decisive against the invaders, as she is the key to defending the most chaotic corners of this place, and the bend of space is her tool. Cruz was gently petted on the head and praised. She felt a little embarrassed, but her heart warmed with joy that she was noticed, and the boy smiled and said that everything from the golden potion to the fire dragon was part of the plan to highlight her. He jokes that if she were sent on an unprepared expedition, she would only cause confusion, and as he continues speaking he suddenly notices Yuri, who looks at him surprised and silently. The boy sincerely thanks her for the support and advice she has given him so far, and PR. He promises to protect the place prepared for them. The woman, moved by his words, cannot hold back her emotions. She suddenly screamed and began to cry exaggeratedly, calling him master, and he, embarrassed by such a strong reaction, just looks and does not quite understand the reason for those tears. The characters joyfully celebrate the contract with the master and enthusiastically acknowledge how much Yuri has changed. Someone tries to calm the situation, and Madi Seishinsane reminds that the real trial begins now. In the next moment, something fiercely strikes a creature in the forest, and a new clash begins. The group anxiously noticed that the dungeon's energy is already attracting wild monsters, even though they themselves have not yet entered. They understand that the power of this place has significantly increased since powerful creatures began leaving their lairs, and they are resolutely moving forward. They were confident, by conquering the dungeon, they would finally get rid of all this farce. The group is already nervous. Everyone wants to complete the mission as soon as possible, and one of them indignantly says he is tired of the gloomy expressions of his comrades. Someone else agrees, feeling the tension in the air. Meanwhile, in another empty place, someone suspiciously asks if everything went according to plan, and from this it is clear, something bigger is behind the events. Through information exchange with the Thieves Guild, the scandal around the hero spread throughout the entire capital. Even if he survives, his reputation as a hero is destroyed, and others will immediately take advantage of this. The group plans to use the raid on the dungeon as an opportunity to try on the image of a true hero. The group reveals their plan to kill Alan Cole. By doing this, they want to erase the image of the former hero once and for all. One conspirator declared that after this, their ally will become a true hero, the one they have always adored, and their goal is clear: to redefine what a hero is and reshape everything according to their own ideals. The tension was at its peak. They stood face to face, unyielding. The first coldly said that he didn't care who he would have to face, and the second, full of confidence, challenged without any hesitation and was ready to fight at any moment. The seemingly calm man receives news that Alan Cole and his squad have begun the assault on the last dungeon. He lies in bed and listens calmly, then, having comprehended what he heard, he smiles confidently, throwing down a challenge to the hero candidates: prove that you are worthy. When the group was asked if it was the true hope of the kingdom, one man mentioned the name Tony Richards, a famous S-rank adventurer, once considered a potential hero. Others recognized him and said they had heard of him before, adding that he had two companions, a mage and a healer. The group was stunned to realize that the boy was a scout from Tony's team, and he was the one who had sneaked in here a few days ago. They're looking around. They notice several more suspicious people nearby. Then the boy calls Dora and Grain, and the girl remains puzzled. They remembered Victor and insisted he would never back down from the role of team leader. Suddenly they realized, this time the invader turned out to be unexpected, a shadowy figure that appeared before them. Alan Cole appears before them with a burning, threatening gaze, and the boy instantly recognizes him, shockingly uttering his name. The girl next to him, confused by the unexpected meeting, tries to make sure she remembers him correctly. Alan and Tony arrive together with their companions, shocking those who did not expect such an invasion. The hero recognizes Alan, the one who expelled him, and looking at his squad ahead, although he had previously said he didn't care about dealing with invaders, admits. Now, because he knows them, it's a completely different matter. The main character thought that sooner or later he would have to face Alan and the rest of the group face to face. He suspects that Mary might have been leaking information. Since the dungeon, he is not even a ranker. He remembers that when Mary appeared, he was already mentally preparing for this inevitable confrontation. The hero firmly assures that he is fine and decides to use everything he has against Alan and Victor. He feels that he is doing this not out of resentment, but because, by destroying the place he once belonged to, he finally gets a chance to follow his ideals for the first time. The main character directly challenges Alan. Meanwhile, Alan's group inspects the dungeon and notices that the first floor has a typical labyrinth structure. But it looks different than before. They discuss whether previous reconnaissance will help them advance. Dormu is called to act. She approaches and places a strange device on the ground. The hero watches with fascination, trying to understand what kind of device it is, but notices it clearly has nothing to do with alchemy. The device suddenly came to life and emitted a strange energy that rolled down the dungeon corridor. The protagonist froze in shock, looking without understanding what he had done, and fears the mysterious effect of that machine. Dormu proudly explains that he created the device. It automatically builds a map of the dungeons by finding identical materials in different points. Although Tony called the explanation too confusing, Dormu summarizes, it is a tool that generates a map of a place that has already been visited. Although the device does not detect traps or monsters, everyone says, the very fact of showing the shortest path already makes it extremely valuable, and since then Tony decides to lead the group. Tony says he can handle the traps, but sudden monster attacks are much more dangerous, so he decides that Victor should go first because of his endurance, and Victor replies that he does not trust him. Then Tony suddenly admits that he has a special skill to deal with this situation, and Victor, hearing this, remains surprised and confused. The main character suddenly realizes he has in his hands an item that draws the map by itself. Freedom is a problem. It takes away almost all the advantage that the labyrinth gave. Yuri is a bit worried but calms her down, saying that only one of hundreds of strategies has become useless. Then he decisively decides to counterattack. He will calculate the shortest path and send monsters to intercept the enemy group. Tony notices that the killer on the other side is extremely agile, able to escape even from monsters and traps, so he concludes that this killer was the one helping with reconnaissance, and although the target looks carefree, Tony admits that dealing with him is difficult, and decides that the first step is to get rid of that killer. Half an hour from the start of reconnaissance, Tony's group was moving without problems, having so far encountered only one trap. It is strange that nothing attacks, but they decided that it is logical after all. They are going the shortest way, but Tony still says that it is too quiet here, and this makes him wary. Suddenly, an ambush. Several monsters jump from above and attack the group, catching everyone by surprise. Victor shouted "Leads," frightened, but his comrade calmed him down and was ready to fight the threat. Tony says that so far the team relied on the stunning power of the hero, so he did not even have a chance to show what he can really do. He activates the technique, absolute evasion. It turns out his body has a skill that automatically dodges any attack, and the monsters are shocked because they miss every time. Tony explains to him that his skill only works if both hands are free, and that to activate it, several specific conditions are also required. Victor worries about sending the child ahead, but Dorma corrects him. It turns out Tony, although he looks young, is actually the oldest in the group, and this astonishes Victor. Alan, confused and exhausted, asks, who is the opponent standing before him? He only smiles sinisterly, then bursts into a leap to deliver the final decisive blow and put an end to the fight. Alan shows his power with one powerful sword strike. He kills several monsters at once. The creatures fly far and crash into the wall with a thud, while he stands firm and confident on the battlefield. The main character looks through the sphere and realizes Tony's ability to dodge is a real skill. He notices that Tony automatically dodges even attacks from blind spots and thinks that perhaps for this skill to work, Tony himself must not attack actively. He recalls that during the previous invasion, Tony behaved the same way, always on defense and seemingly anticipating attacks. The protagonist hesitates to ignore the frontline and focus on the targets behind. Sensory attacks that cannot hit Tony are impossible to repel. But Yuri reminds him, Dorma has already given the killer a potion that fuels provocation. This enraged the monsters so much that they only attacked the one who drank it. That's why at that moment, attacks on others simply didn't work. The moment the main character analyzed the situation and realizes that the enemy group planned everything, traps are easy to spot, monsters cannot hit the target, and they cannot shift their focus. Yuri suggests filling the room with traps to limit escape routes, but he understands that even this won't help without space to retreat. Even the ability to dodge becomes useless. The main character says that even if the place is filled with traps, it does not guarantee catching the enemy. Traps quickly become disabled, and wasting valuable resources is not allowed, because they are needed for expanding the dungeon depths and brewing important potions. Eventually, he concluded that it was better for someone else to activate these traps instead of them. The main character was confused. Even by sacrificing someone to trigger the traps, the attack still would not hit the main target. And then he returned again to the idea to make someone else step on the traps instead of himself. A spark ignited in him. He caught fire. He tells Yuri that this will be their strategy and immediately decides to start executing the plan. The main character decides he only needs a few changes for the last room. The first floor room. Meanwhile, Tony's group approaches, notices the blocked passage, checks the map, and says the head should be the entrance to the second level of the dungeon, so Tony concludes this is the last room on the first floor. Tony's group came across a passage rigged with suspicious wires. A clear trap. Victor asks, was the dungeon carelessly designed only in this part? Tony orders Leeds to disarm the trap. Leeds responds indifferently and begins to dismantle it. As Light starts fiddling with the trap, an armored boar of rank B gets tangled in the wires. He glanced at the creature for a moment, surprised that it was a monster, and soon realized the trap. The animal was released, it fiercely lunged at him, and Tony noticed that due to the provocation the monster was running straight at him. He decided not to step into the trap, but to force the beast to trigger it, confidently thinking that he could deflect any attack with his evasion skill. But when he saw the magic circle ignite right between him and the boar, he suddenly became confused. Tony fell into a trap that cast a curse on him, making him heavier and heavier. Surprised, he felt his body being pulled down and realized this was serious. Before he could react, the armored boar struck him with full force, and Dorma desperately shouted his name, and the chapter ended there. In armor, the boar cast a weight curse that covered the entire room, doubling the weight of targets and destroying their defense. Usually this allows attackers to hit harder, but for Leeds, who relied only on agility, such support became deadly. The boar hurled him with insane force, and he was powerless against the blow. The main hero and Yuri joyfully celebrated their plan worked. He explained that the weight curse is a big problem for agile assassins, but a perfect combination for the armored boar, which makes heavy ramming body attacks. The strike sounded like a cannon shot hitting the target, and Yuri praised the master for foresight. He knew that even without a direct hit, the negative effect would be devastating. The hero instantly analyzed everything and concluded the weight curse probably prevented Litz's automatic skill from working. To roll, because one of the conditions for this to work is a strict weight limit, so ultralight equipment and precise settings are needed. Eventually, the blow hit his vulnerable spot and neutralized his main defense. The group approached Lates and saw that his skeleton was shattered to pieces, a miracle he was still alive. Since no one was available to care for a person on the brink of death, Alan ordered to leave him behind. Despite the woman reminding them, the chance that he would survive still remained. Alan decided they would move to the second floor of the dungeon by the shortest route, relying on Dorma's map to avoid traps. Meanwhile, the man with the eye patch suggested forcing an immediate advance, but he was interrupted. He said there was no need for that, hinting that he had another way to proceed, so the enemy would not have time to change the next floor. While everyone is watching, a seriously wounded man, barely breathing, murmurs with effort trying to say Tony, but the words barely come out. At that moment, a man with an eye patch coldly confesses that he is the one behind the assassination attempt on the king, and it becomes clear why he is here. 10 years ago, in the royal castle of Arledge, Lord Albert noticed with surprise that such a dangerous man was left alive. Another man replied that he was not interested in people's past deeds. What mattered to him were their talents and what they would bring in the future, and he explained that this man's talent was no exception, which is why he was spared. The hooded man declared that this prisoner would have a great influence on everyone's fate. When asked his name, the prisoner replied with a sinister smile that he had no name and that they could call him whatever they wanted. This only increased his mystery and unpredictability. But then someone provokes. Does he really believe he will become a hero with just good words? The hero, thoughtfully looking at the horizon, says he will follow his ideals no matter the cost. Another notes that perhaps it is precisely because these are good words that they keep hope alive in everyone. The man says he will take upon himself all the darkness and filth of this path, so that the other can follow his ideals without dirtying his own hands. So in response, the mysterious prisoner asks, when this darkness is no longer needed, throw him away along with it. He accepts his dark role without hesitation. Before leaving, Alan looks at Leeds, thanks him for everything that was, and says that from now on he will dirty his own hands. Soon, without hesitation, Alan delivers a fatal blow to Leeds, cold-bloodedly getting rid of an ally who had served him so well. So after Leeds was eliminated, the man with the eye patch apologizes for the trouble and suggests moving on quickly. Alan, irritated, mutters that he should have done it from the very beginning. As the group moves on, the man looks back and silently swears to Leeds with a heavy gaze that they will meet again someday. The man with an eye patch, determined, thinks that now, since Leeds' role is over, he will do everything to earn the title of hero. The main hero looks into a crystal ball and analyzes. Although the plan was to wear out the group on the first floor, they ended up on the second floor, much more vigorous than expected, because 2 S-rank adventurers suddenly appeared, which was not taken into account. The main hero decides to change the plan and attack the group of enemies on the second floor. He asks his partner to buy time, not letting them advance, and she confidently replies that it will be easy. He calmly, as if indifferent, even suggests dealing with everyone right there, but only asks her not to overdo it. The scene closes the chapter and leaves tension before the next confrontation. Alan watches that place closely. Finally, he makes his way through the thickets of giant trees and goes to what seems like an entrance. When suddenly birds take off in fright, their sharp flight draws his attention and makes him wary of what might await. Alan and his group enter a new section of the dungeon that miraculously imitates open space, forest, and sky despite being inside. Dormo looks surprised at the spatial distortion, while others explain that such levels usually have patterns, and here the theme is forest and fortress. Alan notices a structure from afar and suggests going straight through it, but Dorma scolds him and says, "Think before you act." The group says that this level is even more dangerous than a regular labyrinth. There are no walls and artificial roads here, only forest. In the end, most new groups die not from monsters, but because they get lost in the wilderness. Dormit feels that the perfect moment has come. He pulls out an automatic map device and safely opens the way. The group discovers that the Dorma scanner works poorly in open space, and this annoys him. He calls the device useless junk. Alan then advises to navigate by nature. Look at the moss. It is thicker on the north side, and assures that this is quite enough to reach such a large fortress. Soon he asks Dorma for a golden elixir, and the mage, a bit embarrassed, immediately fulfills the request. Alan exploded, called Dorma an idiot for wasting time on arguments, and barked for him to just obey, while Dorma tried to object, saying they had few people and were only at the beginning of the second floor. Meanwhile, Victor carefully watches and calms Yuri. Alan is calm for now, but he is driven by an almost animal instinct, and it scares him a little. The main character's group assesses the situation and anxiously notes, a surprisingly strong enemy may be hiding on this floor. The main character noticed that by killing the killer earlier, he instantly earned a bunch of points, but had to pay for it. All the prepared golden potions went to strengthening the monsters on the second floor, because the group of enemies advanced faster than expected, and now they worry about what else might appear. The group was suddenly caught by an enemy attack. One of the comrades shouted a warning, and the hero, irritated, threw out, "This is just a pack of weaklings." At the same time, a blonde woman orders her people, and others to buy time, while she prepares a few more golden potions to strengthen the rest of the monsters, and closely watches the approaching battle. She is curious to see what the hero is really capable of. The group walks cautiously, and a long-haired man sternly warns, "Do not relax." He explains that the open areas created inside the dungeon strengthen the monsters. The fertile mana of this place fuels their power. Meanwhile, the hero repels the attack of a creature jumping at him, ready to fight. Three warriors, Alan, Victor, and Tony, form a reverse formation to cover the support group. Victor is responsible for the rear, the most vulnerable spot. Ready for battle, they prepare to hold off any threat approaching the group. Demal lays out reinforcement elixirs, and Iron releases smoke that restores allies' strength and blinds enemies. Christopher uses every dawn, sends magic to the necessary places, and keeps the group attack coordinated. The team notices that a group of enemies quickly adapts to the prolonged battle. They are preparing to strike in the midst of the first wave to sow chaos and break the formation before the second.